Sold. Let's go. Falk didn't need to say any more. Ben was already grabbing his arms to pull him and Thera along, eager to get there. How could he not be? To his knowledge, the world had 11 awakened skill holders and he knew 5 of them. He wasn't going to turn down a chance to complete the set. Especially not when that meant getting to see what sort of power some of them wielded. The 2 soul mages and the soul smith, the knowledge holder and the record holder. Other than those, he only actually knew of 2 more, among them being the divine cook and the true shifter, meaning there were 6 others to wonder about, even if a realization stopped him in his tracks. Wait, do I already know about all of the terrestrial ones? He asked. It wasn't an unreasonable assumption. While Elvet was aquatic, the other 4 he personally knew were terrestrial, and given that until Yuzu showed up, the current soul mage had to have been focusing on the environment he was most suited for. It wouldn't have surprised him if the ocean races had more currently, with that being a question his teacher couldn't answer. Couldn't tell you honestly. A few of them prefer to keep to themselves, so they aren't actually known in the broader world, and this will be my first time meeting the whole crowd. Other than the bits that are common knowledge, I have no idea who's on land or sea. Huh. I guess it will be cool to find out then. And is that the purpose of this, Uncle? Thera asked. For you to meet your contemporaries? It sounds like that's part of it, but a large chunk is also going to have to do with discussions, both in how we're dealing with the consequences of the last wave and how we might work together between now and the next. A bit awkward to say, but we're all powerful. Finding ways to work together could yield explosive results. And is it actually okay for us to come then? Thera wanted to know. This sounds important. I'd rather we didn't get in the way. Ben was instantly prepared to say just how willing he was to be in the way, but he didn't have to, with his teacher waving away that concern. It was Nair himself who suggested I bring you 2 along, and from the sounds of it, it's not the most unusual thing. Throughout history, it's not uncommon for someone at the 3rd tier to look after those close to it. There'd be no complaints about bringing someone if they were at least the 7th awakened level. If they're young enough, even lower, and seeing as how you're both currently contenders, there's no reason for it to be a problem. So long as one of you keeps one of the things you're a contender for to yourself. A case of literary theft. This tale is not rightfully on Amazon. If you see it, report the violation. I mean, I won't bring it up, but if we include you, 5 of the bigwigs going should already know about my sacrilege. Wait. Actually, is there going to be anyone else there who can see my status? We're going to hope the answer is no, for the sake of saving all of us a lot of headache. They continued to chat as they went, heading to the world's main gate network and passing through a new one. Not a gate Ben had enchanted, while also being one he'd never used, with his nose telling him they'd arrived at a coastal city. Not that that was a surprise. All of the major cities of the world were built on coasts if there was a need for both the aquatic and the terrestrial to interact at a significant level. But what was more surprising was that the scale of it didn't seem to match the other major cities he'd seen. All Faith, the Magic Towers, Warrior's Tower, and the now decimated Craftsman's Tower had all felt significantly grander in scale. That wasn't to say the place they'd found themselves was small. The fact that he could see the marking for an invasion point jutting up in the sky a ways off told him that, but it didn't seem as significant. He didn't know if his teacher was picking up on that feeling in him or just wanted to explain regardless, but he got something of an answer when the Yeti spoke up, quietly enough that only the 2 of them would hear. The meeting spot moves each time. It would be obnoxious if word got out and anyone without the sense to spare came to bother us, but still try not to be too loud about the reason you're here. Understood? Yes, sir. Yes, Uncle. Good. In that case, let's get ourselves situated first. A city that size still needed to carry out diplomatic relations after all, meaning there'd be a few embassies around to take advantage of, with Analia being represented too. The moment they found it, Falk showed off his letter from the Queen to secure himself a room, and that was met with him receiving a letter in return. The Yeti's eyes wrinkling as he read it. Problem? Bah. Something looks like it's come up, so this blasted thing's been moved to tomorrow morning. Could have contacted us before we came. Our time isn't so cheap. Despite his grumblings, he still took the key to his room while Thera got one for them as well, creating the question of what they'd do from there. They knew they were going to be busy for a couple days with it, and even if it wasn't a good use of their time, getting the chance to do nothing for even a bit was a blessing, with Falk being the first to voice how he'd be spending it. If things are going to be like this, then I need a nap. I'll see the 2 of you tomorrow. he told them while he slipped away, looking plenty satisfied to have the chance, even if he'd been annoyed about how it had come up and left the two alone. Well, what do you want to do then? Ben asked Thera beside him. Also nap. It wouldn't be the most productive, but he could use any sort of lay down to focus on making souls for whatever bits of experience it would give him, but she shook her head. If you've got energy, so do I. I feel like I haven't had a proper break forever. Let's look around a bit. A better option that would let him train his connect on any random passersby too. It was a chance he was happy to take, with the two going out to see what that new city had waiting for them. Like seemingly everywhere else in the world that had an invasion point within sight, the city had been largely deserted after the coming of the second wave. There were subtle signs of damage all around to match those empty streets too, with the occasional collapsed building or sign of violent magic marking the fact that demons had made it within to cause some havoc before being eliminated. Of the few others around, it seemed like it was largely handfuls of returning civilians who couldn't bear to leave their homes and businesses, government officials who were doing their best to keep things running, and both members of various military organizations along with adventurers to attempt to protect the people who remained and who used the city as a handy base of operations for looking after everything going on outside of its grounds. With those groups looking like they were either going out or coming back from combat, plenty of the later having some superficial injuries to take up the time of whatever healers the place still had. The state of it all didn't particularly lend itself to basic tourism either. Sure, they found some open restaurants around if they wanted to stop to feed themselves, but the things they'd normally try to do, be it seeing shows or visiting local museums or art galleries, were completely unavailable. But then, maybe that's not exactly a bad thing. It's not like things went particularly well at the last gallery we saw, and even if the mood isn't great, at least it seems peaceful. So what if the streets were empty? It wasn't like they were completely void of options, and the two chatted the best they could despite it all while following their noses down to the cost to enjoy what was available, taking advantage of the bright sky and cool breeze to relax for just a bit to try and forget what troubles they had, even if it wasn't enough to get Ben to stop working. He was still materializing all of the souls he could, and he was still connecting to the few people they passed, both looking for new skills to add to his rings as well as to just train connect in general as he browsed through their minds and memories, not caring about whatever potential right to privacy they may have had in the face of his goal or raising his levels. It was basically background noise to him at that point, something certain minds were regulated to do constantly for what bit of experience it gave him while they went off to look for something to eat once they felt done at the beach. They'd passed enough restaurants on the way there that seemed open that they weren't worried about finding anything, and it seemed like Thera at least had her eyes on a few, cementing their dinner plans for the time being. Or at least it should have until they were stopped in place. "Hey there." Words that made Ben freeze as he whipped his head to see who said them. They'd come out confidently from a man he judged as only a little older than himself, looking like a satyr in race, with large, goat-like horns sticking out of his head along with cloven hooves in place of feet. Someone he was confident he'd never seen before who surely had no reason to interact with them. But that wasn't what made him stop. Despite being only a couple meters away, well within his range, Ben couldn't read his mind. He couldn't sense him at all really, with no aspect of connect working on the stranger. Not just missing the mind aspects, Ben couldn't link up with his soul either, keeping him from seeing and feeling the mysterious other skills in a way that instantly put him on edge. It wasn't like that should have been immediately suspicious to him. Plenty of people had unusual skills. There was no reason not to think that something out there might have been able to interfere with his own. But it was the first time since he'd gained the ability that he'd been well and truly blocked off since he'd been given the skill, and all the more so since he'd awakened it. Maybe the vast majority of people on the planet lived fine without such a thing, but to have it stopped so thoroughly felt like he'd been cut off from one of his senses. Worse was the fact that it was clear he wasn't the one being talked to. With the mystery man's eyes glued instead to Thera, his hand already offered out as Ben slipped in to take it. "Hey there, can we help you?" he said as he gave it a shake, feeling Thera pick up his own edge as she prepared for some sort of confrontation, with the man before him looking more annoyed than anything else. "Sorry, kid. I'm not here for you. Why not go somewhere else so me and the lovely princess can talk?" He knows who Thera is then, so he came to her with some intent. "Okay, then, this novel's true home is a different platform. Support the author by finding it there." He wasn't able to think another word. With the speeds Ben's minds were operating on, he was already going through it the instant the guy had ended his sentence, but it seemed that man had acted to do something at that same time, as all at once, Ben was elsewhere, left plummeting through the sky while watching the city far below. He was already thinking at his maximum speed, so it felt more like he was hanging there than anything else, even if he'd instantly been thrown into danger for reasons he couldn't have guessed at. Made worse by the knowledge of how casually it had been done, tied to the fact that the one who'd put him in that position was now alone with Thera for purposes he couldn't guess at. He could feel Bind pointing him towards her too, letting him know that the mysterious space mage had largely just shot him upwards, with only a bit of an angle to keep him from going splat at their feet, but it was tied to a larger problem too when it came to surviving the fall. Ben didn't have much mana left. He'd been constantly materializing souls to chip away at his job, keeping only about 50 points of the stuff to avoid the effects of mana exhaustion, but now that he was hundreds of meters above the ground, that didn't leave him much room to deal with the coming fall, as he questioned if his defense enhancement would give him any chance of keeping from breaking his neck, and feeling like the answer was largely going to be a no. Yeah, defense enhancement would be a lot better if my base biological defense wasn't so bad. Okay, what options does that leave me so I can survive and deal with this bastard then? Relying on his defensive skills seemed like a quick way to get a broken neck, and he wasn't going to be regenerating some vast amount of mana to help ease his fall in the seconds it would take him to hit the ground, all of which cut his options significantly as he looked over his status for anything, with only one option coming to mind. As he fell through the sky, he did his best to spread himself out for what wind resistance he could while he forced himself to actualize at the same time, trying to create an upwards force against himself to slow him down before finding to his horror that he couldn't. At first, he thought it was another skill that just wasn't working before coming to a different conclusion. When he was in his god's realm, he could freely use the skill to move things the same way he could create them, but the mortal realm was different. He'd already shown that he could make things, but he hadn't actually tested if he could create some bare force, assuming he'd be able to, despite already seeing differences in the way the skill presented itself between those two separate layers of reality. So, giving a prayer that he was right, Ben tried again, actualizing a board beneath him and moving that with his power instead, using the skill to lift it upward against his own weight and feeling another untested aspect of it stab into his mind with his thoughts exploding in agony. He already knew that, in the mortal realm, he needed to maintain the things he actualized, and that doing so created a strain on him, but another thing he hadn't looked into was how the skill would stand up against whatever bits of force it faced. Feeling the difference in the activity with his soul as his physical weight went up against the strength of his mind, with the latter feeling lacking despite the nearly 20,000 points it sat at. Still, it was working, slowing his descent to the point that he was comfortable thinking his injuries would hopefully be on the lighter side as he directed himself back to where he could feel Thera, using that as a focus to escape the pain he was putting himself through and letting him see her own reaction to his sudden disappearance as something else shot off from where he was sure she'd been. The mystery man feeling the brood of her wrath at a speed even a powerful space mage couldn't react to as he was shot off into the sky while she flew in the opposite direction, following the feeling of Ben to reach him as quickly as she could and grabbing him safely in her arms. "My hero," he sighed, more than content to let her carry him down the rest of the way as he released the effects of actualization and tried to deal with the intense strain he'd put himself through, making a mental note to experiment with the skill more to try to avoid making such discoveries in a life-and-death situation in the future again. With the pain he was in not only apparent to him, Thera rushed to look him over, even as she carried them both down. "What happened? Did he do something else to you?" "Nah, just dealing with my attempt to avoid going splat. I'll explain later. More importantly, are you okay? Aside from the fact that I may have just killed someone, yeah. I'm pretty comfortable calling that self-defense, but hey, looks like staying in an embassy is finally convenient beyond just giving us a room. Or we could run away and not look back if you'd prefer. Let's do the embassy and talk to Uncle first. Worst to worst, I'm pretty sure my mom can help deal with this if it becomes a problem, and if anyone does try to toss me in jail for it. Well, I'd rather not do this, but telling my dad and aunts would probably sort things out really easily. Have I ever mentioned how much I love knowing powerful people? Big fan of having your entire family to threaten others with. Not worrying about that though. Did you find out what this guy even wanted before you sent him blasting off?" Ugh. Her face pulled into a frown the moment she remembered the few words he'd got out before she'd attacked. barely able to process it in the moment compared to the realization that he'd just attacked Ben but now there to be reflected on for all it was worth. Thera? He asked me out to dinner. There wasn't much rest to be had that night. After finding Falk and filling him in on exactly what happened and spending what felt like far too many hours going over it with some embassy employees who didn't wake up that day expecting to have to deal with an incident involving the daughter of their nation's queen, the three of them were only able to get a couple of hours of sleep before getting up and heading out. There'd been a serious conversation on if they should go at all, but ultimately they decided to stick to the original plan. As unfortunate as that turn of events was, there was no reason to stop what they were doing when, as far as they were concerned, none of them were in the wrong. If it caused issues down the line, then they'd deal with it, but for the time being, they walked through the streets to get where they needed to be. So just try and keep on good behavior, Falk told them while looking at his apprentice in particular. I'm not expecting any issues, but this isn't a crowd you want making enemies outta. I'm literally always on my best behavior, he said in his defense while Thera spoke up too. And even if that's completely untrue, both soul mages should be there, so I'm sure they'll help out if he does anything wrong. Thera, please. I need you on my side when I'm being slandered. It was only a couple days ago I watched you attack Anetha's church. Well, first off, they deserved it. Secondly, I challenged them to a fight. It was their choice to accept. So if they'd said no, you would have just left? Maybe. There's no way to know for sure in hypothetical situations like that. It was obvious neither was buying it, and he tried not to let it hurt given that, in that example, they were 100% right. If they hadn't gone for it, he'd have just started punching and dealt with the consequences of having less justification. In hindsight, that route may have even been a better option for awakening my sacrilege. Oh well, maybe next time. Fine. I'll be my most upstanding self. He eventually gave in. So how much farther are we? Right there. Falk nodded to the end of the road, at an otherwise unassuming building built into the coast with a single man waiting out front watching the door as they made their way over. Falk, +2, his teacher told the guard, getting a small nod in exchange as the door opened to let them in, immediately showing a wide stairway leading down for them to traverse, ending on another door into what was by all accounts a conference room. With less than 20 people in it, more than a few Ben already knew, the most striking feature of it had to be the enchantments that covered it, dividing the room in two across a large round table, with the other half being filled fully with water for the aquatic races among them, creating an environment where both groups could talk as equals. Just looking at it, he judged that if something went wrong with the enchantment there'd still be enough water in there for breathing room for either group. But despite how interesting he viewed the arrangement, that wasn't what caught the majority of his attention. Sitting at the table with so many others was the satyr from the day before, looking no worse for wear from Thera's attack and instead seeming mostly bored until they caught his eye, leaving the man to give a broad smirk. Falk, small hitch on me being on my best behavior. Ben thought at both his teacher and Thera. The satyr at the table is the one that attacked us. What? His teacher thought back, his face betraying the silent conversation going through his head. Boy, the table is reserved for the third tiers. Everyone behind them are their guests. How? No, never mind. The both of you just keep quiet for now. I'll help deal with this later if need be. For now, just stand behind me. Both he and Thera did as Falk told them, with the Yeti taking the last available seat, all while Ben took in the rest of the room, stretching out with deep connection to get a sense for the rest of them around. The satyr was the only one he couldn't read, and even when looking through the eyes of either Yuzu or Elvit, it seemed they were both blocked off too. But they weren't his only options. Beside Killy, Verbum also had a seat at the table, and his skill had less to do with interpreting the information on souls than it did interacting with the system itself, creating a different avenue to go through and letting Ben see the information being hidden from him. By and large, it was what he would describe as a fairly average status. The man's attributes were impressive, ranging in the high thousands and to low 10,000s, likely in part thanks to any potions he'd received made from the forbidden gods. But when it came to skills, Ben would have described his as underwhelming, with no second-tier ones and the highest first-tier being the 9th-leveled space magic he'd used to attack with the day before. Considering his seat at the table, Ben would have described him as a disappointment if not for what had earned him his place. Not a single skill like the rest of them, but instead two of them in the form of the grand-sounding immortality and absolute defense. Absolute defense, I have to assume that's what's keeping me from reading his mind or seeing his status. It wouldn't exactly be absolute if it kept either his thoughts or soul exposed, but immortality too. I guess it's obvious how he survived Thera's attack, and I can pretty easily imagine how he ended up with two awakened skills. Immortality sat higher on his status, telling him the man, Ben could see his name was Rook, had gotten it first, and he could imagine how one would lead into the other. Assuming no attack he could face would kill him, training defensive skills after that point would be easy so long as the holder could put up with any pain attached to it. Help support creative writers by finding and reading their stories on the original site. If there's any pain, I wonder if a third-tier ability that makes you immortal would let anything you go through hurt or not. Wait, more importantly, how old is this bastard when he decided to hit on my girlfriend? Even if he looked young, there was no easy way to evaluate that for sure when he had skills named like that. A single third-tier skill may have normally doubled the holder's base lifespan on top of whatever they'd have already gotten from getting it to the second tier, but a name like that implied a whole lot more. There was no way something called immortality would let the holder still die of something as banal as old age. All of it left Ben with questions and opinions, but nothing he could pay off then, reserving it all to bother Myriad about that night as he instead looked around the room to focus on the rest around to take in just what they had. He already knew 5 others, so they weren't a major concern, and as interesting as the higher-leveled second tier who seemed to have come along were, they weren't the stars of his attention as he instead looked around at the rest at the table, taking in everything they each held. He wasn't able to tell immediately who among them were natives or summoned. He knew there had to be 5 there like himself who hailed from other universes, but aside from the 2 he personally knew, the rest were a mystery without reading their memories. Beyond that, he got the sense that the terrestrial side of the table skewed on the older side compared to the aquatic, though that was harder to say for sure as well. Age became a harder thing to determine as species varied, and only became more so when one considered how reaching the third tier would affect a given lifespan, with the fact that he lacked experience looking at aquatic groups adding to that. And then there's a couple other unexpected bits too. I didn't think the true shifter and divine chef were going to be aquatic. The first of which wasn't necessarily true. Unlike regular beast form skill holders, he'd reached its pinnacle, becoming able to absorb the souls of the creatures he killed in order to change into them, and Ben wasn't sure of the limits of the skill beyond that. He at least knew that the race that originally held the skill was terrestrial in nature, and while it was possible that the crossbreeding of different groups had led to some aquatic branches for holders of that particular skill, he viewed it just as likely that he was choosing to be among the aquatic groups for one reason or another instead. The divine chef having a largely octopus-like body plan also raised some questions with him about whether they were purely aquatic or if they, like a few others he'd seen, would be more accurately described as semi-aquatic. It was certain that they provided food for the fighters across the world regardless of whether they lived in land or sea. He wouldn't have been shocked if they could work on both either. He thought that should have only left 3 more, but everyone at the table made it clear there were actually 4, telling him that Elvet had to have helped someone else awaken recently enough that Falk may not have been the newest among them, and let him look at the rest. 3 of which were aquatic. None of them shared a body plan, but Ben could at least see their skills, telling him he was looking at holders of Total Collapse, Zone of Empowering, and King of Growth. None of that actually told him what any of them could be beyond some vague guesses, but still poked at his curiosity and left him to wonder in a way that he already knew he'd be bothering both Myriad and Verbum about, leaving only the last one to look over. It wasn't immediately apparent, but as he connected to others at the table, it was more and more clear that people were specifically trying to avoid looking at the last one there, with none avoiding it more so than both of the soul mages along with Verbum. He could feel them not wanting to make eye contact with her, not that it would be a problem. Looking at a girl with a mostly human-like shape and what he could best describe as sickly gray skin. Her most striking features were the 2 empty holes where her eyes should have been, supposedly rendering her blind yet still staring out into the crowd and smiling broadly at the rest. Really, there was a lot about her that made Ben understand why some might not want to focus on her if they could help it. Just by connecting to see what she had, aspects of her mind incorporated into his own thanks to the effects of his alien thought structure, making him feel a strangeness reminiscent of the primordial chaos that still contaminated his thoughts while those new ways of viewing the world fell into place within his head, with the sight of her soul bringing its own questions. While everyone at the table was destined for godhood, they hadn't yet died and properly ascended to go through whatever changes such a thing would bring with it. Meaning while all of them looked unusual in comparison to a standard mortal, they still looked within the range of what he'd expect compared to the divine. That wasn't true for her though. Even in his eyes that had witnessed the souls of gods, the one she held looked strange, its shape alien compared to so many others he'd seen and pulsing in unnatural ways, with slight tendrils of it even poking out of her vessel, seemingly subconsciously and without any rhyme or reason which he could tell. Not that he had a complete enough understanding of souls to understand any unusual aspect they might hold. An aspect that while he couldn't guess at the function of, he at least held one on why it was so alien in the first place. Of the ones he didn't know, she was the only one he felt certain had to be one of the summoned, and not only because of how out of place both her mind and soul seemed compared to what he was used to or because she gave an impression of being younger than him, but also thanks to her number of second-tier skills to go along with the third-tier one to get her the seat. With a total of 5 blessed skills, it wouldn't be inappropriate to say she'd won the power lottery when coming to the world, even if the skills themselves felt deeply questionable from their names alone. Not just her third-tier one with the impressively unwieldy name of Multiversal Self-Monster Production Enslavement, as if the system itself had struggled with how to properly label it before getting to the point it was currently at where it was willing to borrow words from languages beyond world speak. He couldn't possibly guess what it actually did, with that feeling carrying over to the 4 second-tier ones as well. Murder empowering, meat strengthening, malevolent form, and outer ancestry. He could only guess at the first, with the rest sounding stranger and stranger as he went down the list, with all of them being beyond the Zeroth level. The longer he looked only brought out more questions that only stopped with a thought. Not his own though, but the girl very clearly thinking at him. Like what you see. His first instinct was to break off the connection, but he kept it up to try and keep from looking suspicious while he tried to work out what just happened. Unless it had anything to do with any of her strange skills, there was nothing in her status that made him think she'd be able to tell he was reading her mind or looking at her soul, but the reaction meant that something was happening, making the soul mages avoiding looking at her suddenly make a lot more sense, with the girl in question not stopping now that she'd spoken up. "Hey, acknowledge me. I can feel you in my head, and I know you're looking at my soul, so say something. Hey." He finally broke the connection and saw the eyeless girl pout out of the corner of his vision, but resolved to ignore it until he got a chance to talk to Yuzu sometime later, hoping to grab her once the meeting ended. Fox said it would take a few days. If there was any reason to approach her, then he had time to figure it out later. With everyone there though, Killy spoke up once it seemed they were all settled. "All right everyone. Now that we're all here, why don't we begin?" "Hold on." Rook spoke, still smirking while he eyed Ben. "There's something that needs to be addressed here. This isn't a daycare, you can't just bring any random kid along to it." "Do you have an issue you'd like to present then?" Killy asked, her tone speaking of her opinion on the other more than anything else and shouting to the world that she was unimpressed. "I do. Get the brat out of here," he said, dismissively trying to wave off Ben and drawing his teacher's ire. "If you have a problem with my apprentice, you have a problem with me. And it's long been acceptable to bring guests if the skill holder in question sees them as having the potential," Killy sighed. "You don't get to decide that." "Well, this isn't exactly going to be a regular meeting, is it?" he shot back. "Besides, I've been here longer than any of you by a mile. I have an eye for who's actually going to cross the line by this point, and he doesn't have a chance, so there's no use dragging him here. It's a waste of all of our time." He trailed off as he heard the sound of a soft giggling coming from Yuzu, with her teacher looking like he was struggling to suppress his own laughter. "What?" the immortal asked. "You think a couple of newbies like the two of you have better judgment than me?" "Obviously," Elvet said, with Yuzu nodding her head as well while Killy spoke once more. "I'd also say you're an idiot if you really believe that, but frankly, you're well known for your poor judgment by this point. I don't know why you've decided you don't like the boy, and to be clear, I don't care. I've already heard that both of the Soulsmith's guests were brought along at the request of the Godnair, and frankly, if even then you still think it's inappropriate to have 2 guests, then Ben can be mine instead. Now, can we go on?" "No, I'm happy to grind things to a halt if that's the way you want to be," I don't believe it's right for him to be here when he clearly doesn't have potential and I have seniority on all of you. Does such a thing even matter for someone who's never reaching godhood? The divine chef sighed from the aquatic side, seeming both tired and used to things going that way. You claim seniority but never act your age. Can you do us all a favor and shut it so we can wrap this up? Some of us actually have important work to be doing. And as for potential, I would personally place Ben as the most valuable among the summoned, including myself. Yuzu added, with the statement drawing eyes from the rest of the table, Ben's included, with a range of emotions behind them. More than a few were curious upon hearing that, but it was the eyeless one among them who seemed to flare up at those words more than anything, even if she chose to stay silent. It didn't matter so much that Yuzu had outed him as one of the summoned when nearly half of the people in the room were as well. What mattered was her evaluation of him. Something far beyond anything he'd call himself, with Rook laughing as soon as she'd said it. Unauthorized usage. This narrative is on Amazon without the author's consent. Report any sightings. If he was that valuable, then he would have already been in an earlier meeting. Don't get a big head, newbie. I know there's only 5 of you. The tier matters less than how you use it. Elvet sighed. And frankly, I agree. Now, are you really going to say your judgment is better than 2 soul mages? It felt like that should have been the end of it, but still the immortal insisted on being a pain. The judgment of soul mages is famously poor. If it wasn't, there'd be a lot more of us. Infinite hells. Just kick him so we can start already, the King of Growth muttered. What's it matter? The principle, Killy told them. The point of this is to act in a civilized manner with each other and to help find and promote promising talent when we bring someone along. Someone else can't just one-sidedly decide that another's guest shouldn't be allowed. If anything, I'd certainly choose to keep Ben around for the potential he can offer rather than some useless old fool whose only talent is that nobody can get rid of him. That dropped the smug look from his face, changing it to a scowl instead. Oh, so you think he's better than me too? Yes, and it's not even close. Now, are you still going to keep proving me right with every word you say, or can we finally get on to things? Humph, in that case, let's bring it to a vote. Nice and diplomatic, right? What a waste of time, Killy muttered. Fine. In that case, Ben, would you like to say anything so we can get this farce over with? Sure, why not? Give me a minute. Feeling annoyed by the entire thing and spotting a chance to embarrass the one who'd literally tried to kill him just the day before, Ben materialized 2 large posters for all to see, holding them in view for the group to go over, with some of them instantly understanding what he had and laughing. In my right hand, I have all of my current skill levels, as can be verified by both soul mages and verbum. In my left, I have randomly selected one of you to act as a counterexample. Completely random. No bad blood to skew my choice or anything. While his list only revealed his levels while only giving the names of just 4 skills, being his unending crafting, his divine enchanting, his unnatural mind, and his knowledge, he'd laid Rook's list of skills bare for all to see, leaving the man completely simmering in anger across the table from him while Elvet spoke up. I can confirm the levels he's showing for himself are correct, and more importantly, that he's a contender for 4 skills. Considering you've all already heard about him being one of the summoned, I don't need to tell you what that means, but it goes beyond that. When Yuzu first met the boy, he only had tier 1 skills and raised everything he had through his efforts. Frankly, if anyone is still going to insist that he lacks potential, I'd say we should just kick them from the meeting and carry on without anyone around to cause needless problems, but that's just my humble opinion, of course. Now, should we get to the vote already? Everyone in favor of him staying, say aye. A round of ayes went up, only 2 staying silent in fact, which was more than enough to tell Ben the opinion the rest of the table held of Rook, with only him and the strange summoned girl keeping quiet. All right, I do believe that settles that, Killy told them. Now, if no one else wants to interrupt, can we finally get this meeting started? This time there were no interruptions, even if Ben could feel the immortal staring daggers into him from the side while the eyeless girl gave the impression she was judging him in entirely different ways. Nobody then? Good, in that case we can begin. Now to start with, apologies to all of you who found out so last minute about the sudden delay. Some news came to light that unfortunately we need to discuss. The collapse holder Regnal is found guilty of the murder of 10. He fought with and weakening the world's forces as a whole. The room was once more divided with that statement between those who were aware and those who weren't, with the majority who seemed to know coming from the aquatic side since that was where the murders took place. Of the terrestrial, it seemed there was a lot more shock. Falk at the very least had been unaware as to the reason for the delay, and Ben was getting the impression that it was news to most others around him too. Many looking surprised, with only one among them coming across as excited more than anything. Yeah, I'm understanding more and more why nobody wants to look at the spooky girl when she's going to have a reaction like that. More importantly, murder, huh? It immediately made him want to know more, both about the circumstances and the details of it. The why was a big one, and he had to hold himself back from doing anything given that he'd somehow already gotten far more eyes on him than he'd planned on when all of that started, doing his best to wait for anyone else to speak up before he resorted to plundering the murderer's memories to sate his curiosity, with his patience soon being rewarded. What did you do?" Yuzu asked as she rose from her seat, looking like she already had some idea, with Regnal seeming entirely indifferent to the matter. "I did exactly what I wanted. Should that really be so shocking? And whatever power they held is meaningless when I'm easily worth 100 of them." "We don't count lives so easily," Killy told him. "You don't get to decide who lives and dies because of some personal grudge." "Why not? Your gods do, and I'm supposedly going to be one eventually," he shot back. "And for that matter, how dare any of you natives judge me? You have no right. Bringing me to this world to fight your enemies and expecting me to forgive mine at the same time. I'd rather this entire world be destroyed than accept those animals." The table didn't take such a statement quietly. Opinions were immediately being shouted back and forth in a scene that reminded him of a miniature version of what he saw from the actual gods of the world, while Ben began putting together what he was hearing through context, with it looking like all of this stemmed from something Verbum had told him about in the past, a mistake that was objectively on the gods who had brought them to that world. Among the summoned groups, there was one that was brought who had been equally split between two races in what sounded like some sort of interstellar war, with one being invaded by the other in a scene that didn't sound entirely different from what their world was currently going through. He was sure the thought process behind the act was to get a bit more variety with the groups they took, but it was obviously a bad choice from the get-go, destined to end in the current situation the moment it was discovered that one on the defending side had come with a skill at the 3rd tier. Really, if anything, it was just lucky that it had taken so long to happen at all, though it didn't seem like it was going to resolve itself anytime soon, and made it clear why the meeting was expected to stretch on for a few days. Everyone had opinions, and these were the sorts of people that couldn't be beholden to any governing body. How was any mortal meant to rule over someone who was destined for godhood? The most they could do was toss it to their equals and hope they'd somehow sort it out amongst themselves. "While we live on the world, we are tied to its laws," the divine chef sighed, wanting things to end even a few moments sooner to get back to her work. "It doesn't matter what anyone else says. It's not acceptable now, and it won't be acceptable when you ascend." "That's easy to say, I'm sure," Regnal sneered. "And I'm sure you'd be all so much better in my position, wouldn't you? If you were ripped from the world after seeing those you love killed by demons, only to be told to fight obediently by their sides, you'd all do it without a word and just make peace." "I would choose peace in a heartbeat if I could." "How noble." The tone was mocking, and it seemed things would never end with the conversation running in circles from there. He couldn't be allowed to take his revenge while ignoring the law, and it was unfair for anyone on that world to judge him when he'd been brought specifically to fight in a whole new war while being told to forget about the one that killed him. It seemed like things would only keep going nowhere too so since he'd already been dragged into things more than he'd hoped. Ben decided to add a different fuel to the fire. "You might be reading a stolen copy. Visit Royal Road for the authentic version." "Hey Killy, sorry to speak up like this, but am I right to say all of this boils down to whether or not a 3rd tier can get away with murder? A simplification, but yes." "Okay, cool." He nodded before pointing at Rook. "When I arrived here yesterday, Rook attempted to murder me by teleporting me way up into the sky and leaving me to fall." All at once the arguments at the table stopped, the room falling silent enough they'd be able to hear a pin fall, while Killy in particular pinched her brow before speaking in strained words. "Rook, explain yourself this instant." Me? What's there to explain? Are you really going to trust this kid? Over you? Any day, yes. I feel confident that's something any one of us could agree on. Now, since that means you absolutely did it, you explain yourself right this instant. Or what? He grinned. Gonna kill me? If you think I haven't put any of my vast knowledge towards figuring out the numerous ways of dealing with an immortal, then you're sorely mistaken. Now explain, lest I prove myself to you. What's the big deal? He's just being dramatic. Who dies from a bit of a fall? And in case you've forgotten, we're gods. I wanted to, so I did. It's as simple as that. In case you've forgotten, we're still mortal, as flesh as any other, with any future of divinity as uncertain as the fate of the world. You do not just get to kill people. Now, why did you want to murder Ben? He was asking me to dinner, Thera chimed in, not looking at the man. Although he didn't get very far into asking. It seemed like the room heaved a collective groan when she said it, with Killy's mood changing from anger to disgust. Ah, so you flagrantly ignored the law to once more be rejected by a girl centuries your junior. Pathetic. I count my blessings you'll never ascend. You bastard, I'm actually free at least. You can have your little meetings and debates and whatever the hell else you want, but in the end it's the ones like me and Regnal who actually know what's up. Being a god is about using the power you have and not being bound by whatever stupid feelings mortals have on the topic. I'd prefer not to be compared to you, Regnal cut in. Our reasoning is as different as night and day. Both in the sky. Screw all of you anyway, what do you hope to accomplish here? Yeah, you know what, I do what I want, and if I want to find a lady who's gonna still be attractive in a couple centuries to have some fun with before she loses her looks, then that's up to me, and how I get it is up to me too. If it means getting rid of some brat in the way, then that's my business. I wonder how many levels of his... I would assume immortality probably sprouted from something like healing enhancement, so I'm going with that. Either way, how many levels did he get from people beating this shit out of him? A personality like that, I'm not betting on it being a recent development. Although centuries is the sort of span a person could use to change. He felt strangely indifferent to hearing that someone was trying to murder him to make a pass at his girlfriend. He'd already had a person try and fight him for her before, along with some of their predating dealings with Ather and Roan, with the only thing really popping into his head being the question of if he was ever going to get a taste of it from the other perspective. Would it be fun to have some psycho decide they want me badly enough to attack Thera for a change? MMH, no, pretty sure I'd hate that. It would be easier to solve though, considering she could probably squash anyone else like a bug. No clue how the hell I'm supposed to deal with this bastard if he isn't giving up and can teleport. Gonna have to spend some brain power on that or just steal whatever ideas Killy has on the topic. So then, what are you going to do? Rook asked as he looked around. You think I haven't been through this song and dance before? The answer is a big, fat nothing now more than ever. You think you're going to punish us now, especially when there's still another wave coming? Keep dreaming and stop wasting our time. Now if that's not going anywhere, what do you say we move on already? Killy looked ready to snap, but it was the divine chef who spoke first, sounding resigned to it all. He's right. As awful as a bastard as he is, what are we going to do about either of them? I move that we put an end to this for the day and reconvene tomorrow as planned and put the issue of the both of them on hold until the end of the third wave. If we live, we can figure out how Regnal should be punished then and how we should deal with the other idiot. All in favor. A round of eyes went up once more, with enough of the group looking done with things that they were happy to stop there and push the matter to the distant and uncertain future, letting things end in the hopes the air would clear by the next day. With the decision made, the room began to clear, with Rook thankfully being among the first to leave while Yuzu walked over to join them. I wasn't expecting to see you guys. And we weren't expecting you'd be alone. No chaperones? No Jake and Amy. They're all busy enough that they couldn't justify it for what was supposed to be a pretty standard meeting until things went wrong, and Jake can't exactly keep his attention up for it either. Well, since things ended early and someone has already displayed a willingness to kill me, want to get lunch? You seem uncomfortably unconcerned. I've lived on this world for nearly 5 years now. I know how things work at this point. His bleak attitude about the world being said so casually left none of them knowing how to react while his teacher shook his head. I did have plans, but I'd rather not leave you alone if there's going to be trouble. Go, go, it will probably be fine. It looks like I'll have two of the strongest mages on the planet with me. Plus I'm grabbing another couple folks too. Hey, Killy and Verbum, lunch? Ah, I'm busy but my Verbum would love to join you. The knowledge holder smiled while her student looked deeply betrayed. But are you going to stick around for tomorrow, Ben? As unfortunate as it is, that idiot is right. Third-tier skill holders really are rather hard to punish for their wrongdoings, especially one that can teleport. It might be better to head home. Sorry, but I have a firm rule of always getting revenge on the people who try to murder me, so I can't leave yet until I get that sorted. As long as he's not so flagrant about it again, I'll probably be fine. MMH. Well, if he steps foot in the embassy, get Abris, Falk told them. At that point, it's an international incident and he'll be able to handle things in a way we couldn't. Will do. But now, after a nice, stressful morning, I need something to eat to take my mind off of it. Parting from the few they knew, the small group left, Ben dragging Verbum along to keep him from escaping, while the other two looked at him with concern while they made their way to the nearest restaurant. Ben, we really do need to talk about your perception of how dangerous the planet is. Thera sighed. The way you view the world is too warped. You think I'm too over the top in the way I look at a world in the middle of an interstellar invasion? It's the way you look at every other part of it. She's right, Yuzu chimed in. This is an intervention. It's not normal to feel so casual about the idea someone wants to kill you. I don't know what to tell you guys. It's just something you get used to. I'm sure plenty of the other summoned have dealt with the same thing. I sure haven't. Neither have Jake and Amy. Verbum, what about you? Are people threatening to kill you left and right? Some days it feels like it. See, Verbum was a bad example, you know how he is. Yuzu, listen, I don't want to sound classist about this, but did you ever think that you, Jake, and Amy are just shielded from some of the world's garbage on account of your position? Nobody wants to risk losing a soul mage right now, and the other two are with you often enough that they're probably kept safe for most of it. Trust me here, the average person has to deal with way more threats. As someone who's been living as a regular citizen of this world since I got here, I've just been exposed to more realities of the world. A normal person here can expect to have someone try to kill them once or twice a year. I've just adapted. Yeah, that's objectively untrue, Thera sighed. Seeing his argument was making Yuzu second-guess herself, and immediately tried to put a stop to it in defense of the reputation of her planet. You think I've had people trying to kill me constantly my entire life here? I'm sorry, Ben. Reality just hates you. Hold on now, you're not so safe from my point either. You really think the princess of a nation is going to be exposed to the same day-to-day dangers of a common citizen? Not a princess. When your mom's a queen, the point still stands. Besides, just think about it. Didn't your life almost immediately get more dangerous when you moved out of Analia? Which largely coincides with meeting you. I'm just getting sucked into the whirlpool that is your bad luck. I know for a fact you had your issues with Roan before we met. I'm sorry, Thera. I know it's probably not easy to see from the perspective of a native to this world, but compared to Earth, everyone here is in danger at practically all times. She wanted to refute that to try and force him to finally come to terms with the fact that the average person didn't have people come up on the street to try to kill them, but was stopped only by the fact that they made it to the restaurant, with a waiter there to take them to one of the many free tables. 1 for 5 please on the patio, Ben asked, answering the looks he was getting before they could ask. We might have one more in a bit. Gotta see what they're going to do first. The vague answer left Verbum sweating, but Ben wasn't concerned. Looking through the eyes of the people they passed on the way there, he could see they were being followed, but he didn't feel overly threatened about it and wanted to leave room to let them approach if they wanted to. I wouldn't mind talking to them a little if I get the chance anyway. Maybe I'll push the issue in a bit. He had other priorities though, and once they were seated to look over the menu, he finally broached them before anyone could try to return to the topic of his increasingly casual attitude about threats to his life. Okay, so first things first, you guys mind telling us about Rook? He's a jerk, Verbum muttered, with Yuzu in firm agreement. During my very first meeting, he made a pass at both me and Abel and was persistent enough about it that the gods had to step in to tell him to stop. He's obnoxious, but I guess he's been around long enough with his level of power that he's used to getting what he wants. And he wants Thera because? Probably exactly why he said. She's going to look young for a long time, and he wants a pretty companion without having to worry about replacing her too soon. Gross, Thera muttered. Why do I exclusively attract crazy people and bastards? A little hurt by that. Ben, you only fall under crazy person, it's fine. The story has been stolen. If detected on Amazon, report the violation. I'm pretty sure he's more than willing to be a bastard to anyone he doesn't like. Verbum sighed. Verbum, whose side are you on here? You dragged me here, what did you expect? That you'd enjoy this beautiful get-together amongst friends? No. Lame, you'll learn to love me one day. Anyway, backing up a bit. Yuzu, you mentioned Abel, and based on the context I have to assume you're talking about the eyeless girl at the table. The one who neither of you were looking at and happens to have followed us here. Yeah. Wait, what? Behind the bush across the street. Only Thera turned to look. As soon as he said it, Yuzu and Verbum kept their eyes firmly locked on the table. But it was enough to reveal the jig was up. The girl, Abel's presence had been found, and with defeated pout she made her way over, taking the empty seat. What a coincidence. I was looking for something to eat. Didn't expect to find my two pals here, she said, switching to a laugh while grabbing Verbum's face to pull it right to her own, giving a broad, happy grin and acting like she hadn't been caught following them the entire time. Verbs, still so spooked all the time, you've got to learn to relax. And Yuzu, I've got a bone to pick with you. Wachi zichi, Abel? She asked, still avoiding looking at the other while Abel puffed out her chest in indignation. Him, she yelled, pointing to Ben. I can't believe you'd say you think he's better than me. What? What? Yuzu asked, equally confused and put into a place where she forgot whatever discomfort she had with the girl to look at her, getting to see her cheeks puff out. No matter how wrong everyone is about it, everyone here places you above me when you can barely fight. And sure, I get you have your uses, so that's one thing I can deal with it, but what I won't allow is you saying anyone else is. So you, mind reader, fight me. No thanks. Why not? She was clearly upset. Tears were welling in the two empty spots in her head in a way that left Ben feeling a bit guilty and added to his suspicion that she was younger than him, at least when comparing their species, but he gave an honest answer. For one, I'm not a fighter. Two, I have no reason to. Humph. So how can you be better than me if you can't even fight? She asked, seeming a lot more confident after hearing that. But I'm not falling for that either. You smell as strong as you do tasty. Okay, ignoring that second part, yeah, I'm pretty strong, but I don't typically use it to fight, and I have no problem with you. You think you're more important than me? Honestly, I agree, Yuzu just evaluated me too highly. You can be number one. I'm not going to argue with you on it. No, I need to prove it. Now come on. Fight me, fight me, fight me. Maybe young isn't the right word to describe her. Emotionally stunted might be more correct, but it wasn't actually a bad option after giving it some thought. She was sure to be powerful, and when his goal was to eventually deal with what may have been the strongest god in the universe, getting some experience going against someone who was at the third tier wasn't the worst option. Just to see how he'd measure where he currently was, leading to decisions to give in. Okay, you know what? Sure, fine, I'll spar with you after we eat. But just a spar. I don't want you maiming or killing me when you're going to be a lot more powerful. Okay. The moment he agreed, she lit up like it was the best news in the world. Really? Yeah, but again, just a friendly spar. Does this city have a training ground or something? Let's just take the beach. It's not like anyone's going to be using it. Okay, sure. Ben, are you sure about this? Thera asked him, getting a shrug in exchange. If she's not going to kill me, then I don't have a reason to say no. I'd say the way the other two look is a decent reason. Both Yuzu and Verbum looked significantly more scared for it in a way that was admittedly worrying, but he didn't actually get the impression that the girl was a bad person. Childish, sure, but that wasn't the end of the world, even if it left him wanting some answers. So what exactly is the issue? He asked them, not sure how willing they'd be to give honest answers in front of her, while he peeked into their thoughts to get what he hoped would be something less filtered than while they talked. Her skills are a little... Yuzu started, with her mind trying to flash to something but failing, and instead being replaced with a sudden burst of nausea while Verbums took a different turn. His thoughts were actually less clear, with them screaming that everything about her freaked him out. Perhaps not a surprise given his nervous nature, but what he said made things a bit more straightforward. The more you talk to her, the more you'll understand. Hey, I'm right here. And there's nothing wrong with my skills. She was cut off by the rest of their food arriving, giving a break for the others to focus on their meals instead of their company, while Abel looked around the table with a hungry look. Just how young she seemed may have played a part in Ben giving in to her, both with the prospect of a fight and then with him sliding his plate over. Here, want a bite? Can I? Yeah, sure. She smiled brightly at him as she reached out, grabbing not anything from his plate but instead his arm, pulling it towards her face before he could react while her teeth lengthened in response, only stopping from plunging into his flesh thanks to Thera noticing and ripping the two apart with her magic. What the hell was that? Thera spat. Abel, you know he was talking about from his plate. Yuzu sighed while the girl looked guilty. We don't know that for sure. He could have been offering either. Besides, he smells tastier than that. Okay. Suddenly see where some of their discomfort comes from, and why does she think I smell so good? Oh god damn it. Smell and taste are connected, aren't they? This is at least partially because of flavor enhancement. You get a pile of monster meat each day, Yuzu told her, trying to come off as both strict and responsible despite whatever she was feeling on the inside. You don't need to take a bite out of him to try and get stronger. But I'm curious about how much I'd get when you think he's all that. And I want an explanation, please, Ben spoke up. Based on the context, I'm assuming this has something to do with her meat strengthening? Ha! I knew you were looking at my soul. Most of the table likes to peep. Huh? At least you can handle being called out. Actually, that reminds me, you ignored me before. I know you can read my mind too. Ignoring her again, Yuzu answered the question. Her attributes permanently increase depending on what she eats. It's usually just a point or two and it typically has to come from something powerful, but she has the bad habit of wanting to get a taste of the people around her too. You're all meat and you have healers. What's the problem? Ethics. I'm on Regnal's side. Why should I bend to this world's morality? Who cares if it's a person? Why let it go to waste? Because for one, you don't currently have any problems with food insecurity, and the second and more important bit, Ben's still alive. Thera looked like she had plenty to say too, but stopped after seeing Ben's face and getting a premonition of where things were about to go. Less than horrified, he mostly just looked curious. Is it just meat, or is it really any part of the body? He asked in interest. Will blood work too? It will. See Yuzu. I told you he was offering. Some people are just more generous than you. She looked like she had something to say to that, but didn't get the chance as Ben went on. To be clear, I wasn't originally, but I'm willing to make the trade now. If you let me get a before and after look at your status to see what effect I have on your attributes, then I'll give you a cup. What? Why? I already know you can see my soul. Sure, but I can't tell what attributes you have. I can just see the shape and your skills. So we have a deal. You've got it. She laughed as she pulled out her card and handed it over. Look at everything I am and regret that you're not me. Look, he did, with seemingly nothing hidden that he could tell, getting far more than he bargained for with what he was seeing. The most surprising bit wasn't that her attributes were all around 15,000. Combining the benefits of being at the third tier with the fact that she'd surely gotten one of the forbidden god potions which he could easily imagine had its effect enhanced through her meat strengthening the same way his Defiler of Ambrosia would, along with any growth she'd gotten from her daily meal from the sounds of it, having such ridiculous attributes wasn't actually that unreasonable. Nor was the most surprising bit what was found within her blessing section. While only one, it felt apparent it was something that hadn't come from their current reality, being listed as the primordial corpse fragment. After finding out that Yuzu had been engaged to one of the gods of her old world before coming to that new one, Ben had been beginning to suspect that the potential that allowed someone to arrive with a skill at the third tier could be related to the benefits they'd gotten in their home reality before going through the changes being pulled to a new one would bring and arriving with. Something that was by all accounts a blessing was sure to do the job, no matter how uncomfortable the name may have been. No, what he viewed as the most shocking of all was the fact that she didn't have 8 attributes but 9. Something he didn't even suspect was possible while looking at the foreign one sitting at the bottom of her list. What the heck is weeping? Ben muttered to himself in curiosity, with Abel holding out her hand. Food first, questions after. Okay, fine. A deal was a deal, and the fact that she seemed willing to answer his questions made him a lot more motivated to get on with it, so he materialized both a cup and a knife, dragging the latter across his palm to fill up the first while the girl beamed. Downing it the second it was handed over and immediately looking like she wanted more. Okay, that wasn't ideal. That's even better than I thought it would be, she sighed happily. And why do you smell even tastier now? Because reality hates me. Anyway, back on topic. What's weeping? His immediate assumption was it was an attribute that normally wouldn't exist in his current reality but did in her old one that she'd somehow managed to hang on to when passing over. But it seemed the answer was more complicated than just that. Looking proud as she said it, Abel explained. It's something only the chosen get. My ancestor Sothith saw my potential and gave me my fragment, and all of its tears make me stronger. Normally he would have gotten it back after I died, but it looks like it came with me when I was brought here. Another reason I'm the best of the summoned for sure. That wasn't a great explanation. When Ben looked at her card, he'd seen that the race listed was Child of Sothith, and combined with the fact she just called them an ancestor, he had to assume that either she was being literal and her people as a whole were named for their family line, or else that it was her God-given. It sounded like they were still alive and that she'd by all accounts been given a blessing. Perhaps even both. They were dealing with an entirely different universe and he didn't know the rules it played on. What was he to say without getting more information first? Given that they were going to spar soon, he resolved to peek into her head when he got the chance, since he'd probably be able to keep it from being obvious he was doing it for anything more than a combat advantage, but for the time he focused back on what he was seeing. Okay, so it makes you stronger. How? Give me another cup and I'll show you. Let me check if you've gotten any changes from the first one yet. How long does it normally take? It should only be a few seconds for me to get whatever growth I will for it. What? That shouldn't be enough time for you to digest it. How? No, I can already tell I'm not getting an answer, so just a second. His eyes scanned over her attributes, seeing what changed and by how much. Looks like a point to your mana regen, vitality regen, and 3 to your intelligence. Is that good? Really? She ripped the card from him as he said it, scanning over it herself and looking bright with the outcome. Worse than any of the other third tiers I've gotten a bite from, but better than anyone else. The regen rates don't usually grow so much. Give me the second cup. Listen, you have to at least say please when you're trying to eat someone. Please. Ben, I don't think the focus should be on manners here, Thera whispered to him. You should not be this willing to let people eat you. Don't spoil her just because she seems young. It's just the one more promise. Besides, I really want to know what this attribute does. It's not every day you see one that doesn't exist in this universe. Just don't complain to me if she develops a taste and nobody's around to protect you. Nah, it should be fine, right? I still don't think she's a bad kid. His positive thoughts were betrayed by the sight of her wiping away drool while staring at him, holding out the cup and already eager to get more. Okay, last one and then never again. He cut his palm once more and filled it up, getting Thera to heal him and watching as Abel this time savored what she'd been given, looking satisfied by the time she was done. Delicious, even better than the first one. I was right, you did get tastier. Does that mean each time you're going to be better than the last? No, a skill just happened to go up after the first one and it made the difference, so no looking for more. Now, weeping, you were going to show me how it works already. Fine. Since I got something good, there's no harm spending it now, so keep those eyes on me and watch. The other 2 peekers can too if they want. Neither Yuzu nor Verbum took her up on that offer, and since it sounded like one needed to be able to see souls to witness whatever was about to happen, Thera was out of luck. leaving Ben alone to watch what she was doing while she explained. Weeping is just the speed I gather tears at, with one forming about every other day at my current rate, and as I save them up I can spend them like this. He watched as a segment of her soul moved when she said it, looking like it was squeezing a part of itself into another region while one internal section flowed, with a significant change coming with it. Her meat empowering, which had been at the second level, grew to its third. You have an attribute you can spend that directly levels your skills? He couldn't hide the awe in his voice, and she happily soaked it in. What can I tell you? This is why I'm clearly the best. And how often can you do it then? It's obviously not a level for every tear, right? For that one, it was nearly a year of savings. Consider yourself lucky you got to witness it in person. But if I wanted to focus on my Tier 1 skills, I could raise anyone in the span of a few weeks at most. It gets harder the higher the level though, but the cost also reduces as I get closer to raising them naturally. She seemed smug, and as far as Ben was concerned, she had every right to be. That explained some of the levels he was already seeing in her soul. If he was in her position, he would have wanted to raise those ones too to see how they changed with each increase, with her meat strengthening being the most important on that front. If she got more levels to it, then, from what he understood, she'd be able to more quickly raise her weeping and gather tears more quickly, creating a small feedback loop to help her overall growth. All of it made him want to disassemble her mind even more to see what other secrets it held, and whatever look he was wearing was enough to make her back up. Hey! I appreciate that you've been such a willing meal, but that doesn't mean I'll let you have a bite of me too. Don't want it. I've just got one last question if you don't mind. Since you already know I can look at your soul and can look in your head, how exactly can you tell? It doesn't look like you have any skills directly related to it, though I can't exactly judge a couple of your awakened ones by their names alone. Huh? How can I tell? I mean, you make it so obvious. I could feel you rooting around in there the second you did. Okay, but that doesn't tell me how. Is it one of your skills or not? It's not, it doesn't need to be. There's no subtlety to it. If you tried that back home, you'd be ripped to shreds in a second. So the people of her homeworld can tell this sort of thing innately? Interesting. He knew that certain things that could be considered a race's innate or biological qualities weren't always going to be reflected in the system. It wasn't like he had a walking or breathing skill, but as far as innate abilities went, the ability to feel if someone was reading your mind or looking at your soul felt on the extreme end. It only made him more and more interested in seeing the context her old world existed in, and to get a little closer to a place he thought he might check, he scarfed down the rest of his food while the others finished up as well. All right, now that that's done, let's do this already. Ben, I just want to point out that this is pointlessly stupid and dangerous. Thera sighed as they arrived at the empty beach. You can't know if she's actually going to avoid seriously hurting you. But if anything goes wrong, my lovely girlfriend will help put me back together again. Right? Support the creativity of authors by visiting Royal Road for this novel and more. MMH, your lovely girlfriend would rather you not walk into positions where you could get hurt to begin with. I don't even know where to begin with telling you off. I'll make you something sweet when we get home to make up for it. This is just a good opportunity is all. I get to see what one of the stronger third tiers is capable of and see how I compare. So let's get started already. Abel yelled, dropping Verbum to the ground after she'd taken Ben's role of forcefully dragging him along, which had only provoked more fear in him than usual. Lying unconscious on the ground, Yuzu went to his side to make sure he was okay before dragging him away. All right, but again, this is just a spar. Don't murder me. I'll do my best. With those last words, she moved with the intention to start, not immediately attacking him but instead bringing her wrist to her teeth and biting down, letting blood splatter in the sand below. What? Instantly Ben was connecting to her, reading both her mind and memories for whatever information he could get, while she just grinned before the dirt below her exploded with dozens of monsters pouring out. What the hell? Like giant slime molds made of mismatched parts. Their gray flesh was a conglomeration of pieces looking nearly randomly arranged, from claws and teeth randomly sprouting without order. No two shared the same number of eyes or orifices, instead looking like the lazy products of an amateur god, which is probably exactly what they are. Their appearance wasn't some random coincidence. Abel didn't seem remotely caught off guard by them, and he could only assume he was seeing her main skill in action. Multiversal Self-Monster Production Enslavement. The unusual skill with the unwieldy name suddenly made a lot more sense given what he was seeing, with it looking like an ability to create monster slaves from the holder's flesh and blood in a similar way a life mage could create a homunculus, with one key difference from the get-go. They had souls. From the way it looked, he was fairly sure they were extensions of Abel's own, acting in a similar way to how he could fill an empty vessel to control, but he didn't know more than that then and there, only moving to stop the coming flood the best he could with the mana he had. It wasn't how he was used to doing things, but with his mana he took the sand around each one, reshaping it into a sealed box to trap them as they threw themselves at him, screaming and oozing the entire way while he stole their freedom. "What are you doing?" Abel called from the side as she continued to make more. "There's no way that's your best way of attacking. This is just a spar. I'm not going to try and kill them. You're going to want to. Otherwise things are about to get real bad for you." One of them jumped into her hand as she said it, and with her strength she tore the body in half, prompting an instant change in the monsters she'd made. They'd been fast before. Ben had been able to keep up thanks to his thought speed, but now they'd gone up a whole other level too, each one flashing across the ground towards him, while the ones he'd already captured gained a burst of strength to break out of their confines to continue their attack. Oh, that is not fair. He could guess he was seeing the effects of murder empowering. What he was assuming was a buff skill that activated whenever she got a kill, but the fact that it not only worked when she killed her own creatures but also spread its effects to all of them could only feel like cheating. It also meant that he couldn't be so careful if he wanted to have any chance at not immediately being taken down. If she wasn't worried about her creations being killed, then he had no reason to be cautious of it and began attacking in force, shoving his mana into the world around to rip and stab everything that came for him, hitting all he could see at once, and even ones he couldn't by looking through other eyes but finding another problem to go with it. The things Abel was creating were tenacious. With their strange forms, they had no obvious weak points to exploit, making the only choice he had being to disassemble them, using his power on the surrounding sand to tear them apart, trying to be as conservative with his mana as possible by attacking in a way that would always land multiple hits while the monsters kept coming. "Ha, you're not bad," Abel yelled, looking like she was having fun more than anything else while keeping Ben entirely on the defense, trying to deal with an endless wave of creatures that felt like they were growing stronger by the minute. "In that case, let's go a bit harder. Or we could not." She'd stopped listening by that point if she had been to begin with. Looking through one of the monster's eyes, he could tell that Yuzu had covered Thera's off to the side, which he took to be a warning sign when he felt the monsters begin to change, their flesh shifting, warping, and more than anything else, straining. What they were was changing, pressing against reality itself in a way that Ben was able to witness with his own senses as they warped in a way he struggled to describe but brought forth memories of sights and experiences that still ate at his mind, with at least part of what one of her other skills was became clear. As the monsters shifted into more chaotic versions of themselves, and Abel herself seemed to go through more subtle changes, he had no doubt in his mind that what he was witnessing was her outer ancestry taking effect. With what he was seeing while he processed her memories giving him the context he needed to believe he was correct as to what exactly it was and where the skill came from. Regardless of being born to a universe, the girl in front of him had the blood of outsiders running through her veins. It wasn't something he knew how to react to and decided to push it to the side for later. He was still processing her memories, and being connected to an outsider didn't necessarily imply anything about her to be worried about. His main priority was dealing with her swarm. The effect on his mind was slim compared to seeing his first outsider or the chaos, to the point that he believed an average person could probably handle it to some extent without having their mind crippled. But the real issue was that they'd been further strengthened and gained another ability on top of it. Their orifices began to leak and drip fluid, and where it touched the sand beneath them dissolved, the end product evaporating into a gas from there, leaving what remained as a slick, glassy surface. "Hey, that feels a bit more violent than just sparing. It's fine, you're doing well so far. You can handle this much." She was looking positively manic by that point, eager to go on and telling him she would only get more extreme the longer they went, leaving Ben to push to end things if he could. Since they'd begun, he'd focused on her monsters, but he needed to turn his attacks to her and began shooting rocks at her limbs, without any of those hits being acknowledged to a significant extent, leaving him to spend his mana in a different way. With what he'd seen of her attributes, she'd be able to react to most spells he could cast at her, meaning he'd need something instantaneous, and with the combination of his magic and his thought speed, he thought he could make it happen, reaching out with his mana and materializing tight chains around her that actually provoked a response. For just a second she looked down in surprise before grinning all the wider, looking like he'd given her exactly what she wanted as her flesh shifted, leaking through the bonds that held her, letting her break free in seconds. So I'm betting I just learned one of the effects of malevolent form. Wow, I really don't like her power set, with it coming along with an added drawback. By trying to attack her as well, Ben had just pulled Abel's true body into the fight. With her speed in the thousands, Ben was immediately able to learn another horrific effect of her strange skill as her mouth opened up, her lower jaw splitting open to reveal rows and rows of sharp teeth that continued all the way down as her body unwrapped itself, splitting at her torso while it tried to lunge at him, clearing a distance in a way he'd compare to teleportation with how instantaneous it felt. Holy shit. I lose? Stop trying to eat me. She froze at those words for a second before returning to her regular form, the monsters she'd made crumbling around her as she once more looked mostly like a normal girl, giving a happy little jump and cheer. That's right. I win 'cause I'm the best summoned. You see that, Yuzu? Nobody's better than me in a fight. I tried my best not to see that, she said, still with her eyes closed and still covering Thera's. Is it okay to look? It was always okay. I'm asking Ben. Yeah, you're good. The fear the other third tier seemed to hold for her made significantly more sense while he needed to sit down to process things. Both the fight and what he'd seen in her memories. It was a lot, all of it, and he was going to need to add it as another thing to talk to Myriad about that night, but his main takeaway was how badly he'd lost. Sure, he had other things he could have used. He hadn't been fighting like his life was on the line, and he'd limited himself by not using any of his Connect-derived skills. Meaning no using his mind to inflict mental damage, and no trying to force his will on her to override her thoughts and actions. But if he really was going to try fighting a god who was going to be a whole lot more powerful than her with those handicaps, he'd just seen how badly it was going to go. God, I'm dead like this. Something in him seemed to be giving a bit of that mood away too, with Abel coming to his side and slapping his back. Hey, you did pretty okay. Don't be so down. I was just too good. Nobody could blame you for losing. Yeah, it's fine. Actually, I have 2 questions for you if you don't mind. Were you holding back at all? Yeah, it was just a spar, right? It's not like I'm looking after a gate. Okay, even more depressing, so going to try and brush past that with my curiosity. Alright, and your third tier skill, am I right in thinking that those things you create are basically twisted clones of yourself you can control? It's a bit more to it than that, but you have the gist. And malevolent form is some sort of shape-shifting skill that lets you rearrange your body structure too, including making more parts like teeth? You picked up a lot in that, yeah, why? Okay. Sorry if this is insensitive, but if you've lost your eyes, couldn't you use those skills to grow them back? Or at least use them to boost Yuzu's ability to help you grow them back. Since her monsters had some he knew that she had to have originally as well, and he frankly had a lot of questions about her eyelessness. He doubted that when the gods of the world had gone to the trouble of building them new bodies that they'd left the injuries they may have had back on their original worlds, but that would mean someone with her level of strength had lost them since coming there, something he couldn't easily imagine, even if she'd only been half as powerful when she'd first arrived. Despite the question, she just laughed. What, these? She asked, blinking for a second and growing lifeless gray eyes to fill the voids she'd left before blinking again to get rid of them. Sure. I can have all the eyes I want. I just prefer not to. Why? They're distracting. Yep, definitely seeing a lot of reasons the others might be uncomfortable with her. So, now that this is over, can I ask what the point of any of that was? Thera asked as she and Yuzu joined, leaving Verbum's unconscious body off to the side. To prove I'm the most important summoned, obviously. Okay, but Ben isn't important because of his combat ability. The fact that he's gotten pretty good at fighting at all is really just a bonus. It seemed she was also picking up on his down mood after his loss and was trying to help in her own way, even if she wasn't seeing where it had come from, to point out the inherent flaw in the entire point in the spare and making Abel's face fall. What? Then what do you think makes him so good? Huh. Despite my role, he's helped more people awaken their skills than I have, Yuzu answered. And by a significant amount too. That's why I'm comfortable saying he's a lot more valuable than me. Wait, that's why? Then what was even the point of competing like this? She yelled before thinking for a moment. Oh well, though, it was still fun. Ben. Fight me again another time, and I'll think of a better way to show the world I stand above you. You can have a comfortable place as the number 2 summoned, and I'm fine with Yuzu thinking of herself as number 3 if she really wants. As for Verbum, well, if he ever fixes his napping problem, he could snag a spot in the lower middle probably. Okay, sure, sounds good. Now that that's done, shall we dash? His sentence was cut off by a hand pressing against his back and the sudden feeling of being elsewhere. Dirt pressing in on him at all angles as he was once more teleported somewhere else. Oh, this day can't get any worse. It wasn't hard to pick up on what happened. There was only one space mage currently gunning for him, and the idea that Rook had found him and teleported behind to attack wasn't unbelievable, even if it was still outrageous. With his thoughts moving at their maximum, he processed what had happened, using all the information available to him. It was obvious he had been teleported underground, and based on what he could tell from the effects of Bind, Thera was somewhere beneath his feet. Since he knew the man's skill level and total mana, he knew he couldn't be more than 100 meters down when the guy could see where he was teleporting, which meant that as it had happened, the immortal had changed his orientation. Flipping Ben on his head to try to make him think up was down to waste whatever time and mana he would before figuring it out. It wasn't a bad plan either, but it suffered too many flaws from what Rook couldn't know. He'd attacked when Ben was finished fighting, but unlike the last time, he still had over 1,000 points of mana left to spare, and he had no clue that Thera would know where he was as well, feeling the same link that bound them. Which meant he really only needed to last until she found him, but he didn't want to discount the possibility that he'd do something to her as well, teleporting her away to keep her from helping him or whatever other stupid thing he might try, meaning he needed to start getting himself out of there through his own power before he ran out of air, and with the mana he had left he began to spend it. The dirt around him began to move and his body with it, sliding over him and shifting in a way that made him feel like he was being warmed by ants as it slowly pulled him up, shifting past the tons of stuff above while he crawled higher, feeling his lungs burn as the seconds went on. Spending a bit more mana, he condensed some of the surrounding dirt to give him some breathing room before materializing the mix of gases his body craved, letting him breathe for a bit before continuing but losing the need to go on with the dirt he was moving through, pulling away, Thera having made it down and lifting him from the pit below. This has not been the best day. He sighed as her mana pulled him from the depths to her arms. I really wish you had something more to say about a second attempt on your life. What else is there to say? Did you shoot that bastard off again? No, your new friend is keeping him busy. I can see why she freaks Yuzu out. Thera nodded to the side where a bizarrely comical scene was taking place. One where it looked like a formless mass of gray flesh was continually chasing a teleporter until finally catching and eating them, only for them to pop away thanks to their magic soon after and repeating again and again without end. Stop trying to eat me, you psychotic bitch! Rook screamed, his clothing soaked in saliva and digestive fluids. I'm not here for you. You're here to be a pain in the ass. The mass? Abel yelled back despite her current form lacking any obvious mouth. Don't get in the way of my fun. You know how hard it is to get anyone to play with me. Okay. If she's gonna say stuff like that, then I can spar her a couple more times in the future. Ben, I can see you being a bleeding heart, and if she eats you, you're getting no sympathy. The narrative has been illicitly obtained. Should you discover it on Amazon, report the violation. Will I still get healing though? Obviously, just don't make it a habit. Their small back and forth was enough to catch the ears of the two in the midst of their chase, bringing it to an end with Abel making her way over first, her form shifting back to the more human-like one it seemed she'd wear in that world. Don't worry, number 2. If he gives you any trouble again, just let me know, she told Ben proudly. I'm pretty sure I can figure out how to digest him eventually. Pa, you're not that good. Rook spat as he walked over, prompting Yuzu to join their side and give a disapproving glare while Abel only looked excited. Stay in my stomach then. I'd love to see which of us comes out on top. Go screw yourself. And you, kid. You see you're outclassed too, so give up and get lost while I'm still being nice here. Are you really still going to try and hit on Thera while you're covered in stomach acid? I could be covered head to toe in pure shit and it wouldn't matter. Doesn't matter what fancy second-tier skill you have. Only one of us is a god, and if you get in my way, I'm going to make sure only one of us ever gets to be a god. You hear me? Sure, loud and clear, we just need the go-ahead from the only person that actually matters here. Thera, you heard Mr. God over there. Do you want him more? Ben, if he kills you, then I'm doing everything I can to make sure the gods hold him accountable, even if it means I get to the second tier of sacrilege, and if that's still not enough, I'm hitting him so hard he ends up in the sun. There's literally nothing he can do to convince me to choose him over you. Rook backed up a step as she said it, but he still glared their way. Bah, you say that now, but I've heard of you, girlie. You have what? A few thousand years ahead of you, maybe more? This guy's going to be dead before you know it. Pick someone who's actually going to be around to enjoy. 'Cause even if you don't give in now, you'll just come looking for me in the future. Then you can keep dreaming about that future. Anyway, mid-sentence she spent her power, catching Rook off guard as the force of her blow shot him out into the distant ocean before he could react with his magic. I'm personally about done for the day. Yuzu, can we walk you back anywhere before we turn in? I just want to lay down and relax after all of that. Sure. But we really do need to do something about Verbum first. Oh, if you're all done, let me take him, Abel yelled. I've barely gotten to speak to verbs at all. He can keep me entertained once he wakes up. Okay, that's probably fine, Thera said while Yuzu nodded. Both girls thinking about how much he wasn't going to like that when he came to. Just no taking bites out of him without his consent. Okay? He's only good for intelligence anyway. Even if he gives a lot of it, there's not much I can use it for. You, on the other hand, No, thank you, but I'm going to pass. Now come on, guys. Let's get out of here before Rook sorts himself out. Dragging both Ben and Thera along like she was trying to run away. They heard Abel yell about seeing them again tomorrow while Ben caught sight of her hoisting Verbum over her shoulder while they left, with Thera looking to Yuzu as she did. So, have you actually let her get a bite out of you before? I gave her some of my blood in the past like Ben did, she admitted. I was trying to understand how her soul worked with Elvit because it's, well, weird but potentially useful if any of her stranger effects could be induced in a normal one, and that was how we all discovered that not only do soul mages give her bonuses to all of her attributes, but especially to her weeping. Seeing as how that's her most important one, and there don't seem to be many good sources for it, she wants to get more every single time. Oh yeah, I can see why that would be hard to deal with, and, Ben? Yeah. You okay? You seem quiet. Yeah, I'm fine. Just a lot on my minds. This guy's going to be dead before you know it. Despite himself, after everything else that had gone on that day, Rook's words had ended up echoing around Ben's head, ringing all the more true when combined with his otherwise uncertain future. After dropping Yuzu off and making their way back for the evening, the first thing Ben did was lay down and rest his eyes, neither sleeping nor going up to his god, instead trying to get the smallest bit of a break while aiming to keep any thoughts from his many minds. He'd just lost a fight to one third-tier skill holder while being taken by surprise by another, and in both times he'd been basically powerless to deal with it when his biggest goal was to somehow become strong enough to deal with someone who stood miles above either of them in less than a year's time. He'd known from the start it was unrealistic, and a big part of the loose plan he had revolved around the idea that he'd have the strength to go far beyond his current enchanting ability by then, so the way he'd just done things didn't even apply, but nonetheless, it showed him how out of his league he really was. Would it be smarter to try and find someone else and then do what I can to raise them up in their own sacrilege? If Rook had even a speck of talent, he might not be a bad idea despite being a colossal bastard, but given it sounds like he's been alive for a few hundred years and still doesn't have any other skills at the second tier, he's not worth much beyond his ability to not die. Abel's a much better choice, and I can already think of a few ways to boost her nice and quick. Get her the Zeroth level and let her tears do most of the work, and then we could try to get her to eat one of the shittier gods of the world to push her up as many levels as we can, maybe even awakening her. Hell, the plan I have to speed through my jobs could easily help her too. I don't know if job bonuses affect how many tears she needs to spend, but even if things aren't so lucky, with the way I'm planning on speeding through things when I'm done with World Killer, I'd be able to bring her into my party to help her get through any and all of the options she has too. It would be a worthy idea to look into. Except I've met Owen, and as strong as Abel is, I'm really not sure it would be enough even if I can get her to the third tier of sacrilege. Which means nothing I do will be enough either, obviously. God, this really is going to be impossible, and on top of that, his thoughts were cut off and he opened his eyes, seeing Thera on top of him looking back. Feeling frisky? Maybe I would be if you'd tell me what's going on in your head. I think that as of the last few years, the answer could pretty easily be summed up to a lot. You know what I'm talking about. What's bothering you? God, where do I begin? It felt like he had a million concerns of varying world-shattering magnitudes, hitting him from all angles at all times, and here Thera was forcing the issue. It was the perfect time to finally sit and talk to her about his concerns about the world and the war and what felt like the inevitable fate of it all. But that wasn't where his mind flashed. No, his thoughts immediately went to a related issue, one Rook had oh so inelegantly brought up while he was being rejected. Do you ever feel like you'd be more comfortable with someone with a longer lifespan? Ben Dash. Not like Rook, obviously. Someone who's not a complete tool/attempted murderer. Someone who's going to have more than another 100 to 180 years ahead of them. Her first reaction to hearing that was to pinch his cheeks and tell him off, but she could see that even if it wasn't the main thing, the idea was bothering him in a way she wasn't used to seeing, so instead she placed a firm finger on his chest as she spoke. Ben, I'm going to say something embarrassing here, and I'm only going to say it once, so you better make sure you listen the first time. Understood? Okay? When I decided I wanted to be with you, it wasn't because I magically became fine with dating out of the blue, and you were the first person around who I happened to get along with to try out. I am able to be in love because it's with you. Even if I live for thousands of years more after you pass, I'm going to treasure every minute we've had together, and nobody and nothing is going to be able to change that. My life has completely changed by having you in it, so no worrying about what some random psycho has to say. Understand? She leaned down to kiss him as she said it, leaving him briefly dazed when she pulled away. Okay, understood. Wow, I would give you literally any amount of money to say that again. Seriously, just ask. Nope, you get the once, and you can use that perfect memory of yours to replay it in your head however often you want. What would you even get out of hearing it again? Getting to enjoy you looking cute and embarrassed when you say it? This book was originally published on Royal Road. Check it out there for the real experience. Still no. Now, I want to know the main thing that's been bothering you, because it's clearly not just this. You've seemed at least a little off since getting back. What? Can a guy not just be good and traumatized from his second kidnapping? Ben. Sorry, he sighed. You're right, and this is something I've been wanting to talk to you about anyway. It's just a matter of finding the time and putting my feelings in order and trying to make sure I can actually reach my goals and that I'm not insane and a lot. I've been thinking about a lot. So tell me already. I don't believe we're going to win this, Thera. The invasion, the war, everything. There's not a single speck of my heart that believes there's a possible future where we come out on top. I was doubtful before I saw the demon's world, but now I'm comfortable saying it's basically a fact. This world is clinging to a delusional level of hope against an enemy that numbers in the what? Trillions at least, maybe beyond the quintillions for all I know. I guess the Grey would have a better idea, but they still haven't said anything since I've gotten back, and... Sorry, I'm rambling. They sat in silence for a moment, Thera taking in what he'd said before speaking again. So that's what's bothering you? The hopelessness of it all? No. Well, I mean, yes, that too, but mainly no. I feel like I've seen the end of the world, but there's also one pretty obvious way to stop it, named Owen. What? The demon god you saw? She asked, not understanding where that was going while he nodded. Yeah, and for a lot of reasons. This is the only god the demons have. An entire galaxy worth of faith is being centered directly on him. He's so powerful that even if we somehow kill every demon in the whole of reality, he probably has the strength to eliminate this world with a wave of his hand and uplift a whole new species to fill the void his kind has left behind. But if someone could kill him, then the demons would be basically sorted out. With O'Gilt and the other space spirits freed, he has to be handling their gate network himself, so if he's killed, the invasion ends, trapping every demon that does exist on their various worlds and leaving ours alone. The issue with killing him comes back to power, though. Even standing on the world he was on, I was instantly hit by the feeling of his divinity, and if I could feel it, then it would cripple anyone else. If Owen has to die, then someone really does need to have a third-tier sacrilege to get close, and seeing as how I'm the first on the planet to awaken sacrilege in general, let alone get it to the 9th level after that, I have the best odds of making it happen. You're expecting to die. It seems like the most likely outcome, yeah, but I have plans I'm working on to reduce the odds. I've already got a great idea for absolutely cheating the job system in a way that was never intended for some positively insane growth bonuses, and if that still doesn't feel like enough, I have another couple ideas too to improve things to get my goal of awakening sacrilege and connect before the next wave to give me the benefits I'd need to have half a chance. Okay, way less than half a chance, but a non-zero chance of succeeding. The tension he could feel in her slowly growing as he spoke disappeared the second he explained what he'd need to do it. Speaking of how low she viewed the odds of him managing to awaken the two skills, especially when one was still only at its 7th level and reaching the 3rd tier was the sort of goal people could spend the rest of their lives on without success. Even if she believed he'd be able to pull it off one day, that sort of timescale was a whole other issue, a fact he was more than willing to bring up. Don't think I'll pull it off? I didn't say that. You were thinking it. Reading my mind is cheating. I'm super respectful of your mental privacy when it doesn't seem like we're in danger. Your very expressive face, on the other hand. Reading my body language is also cheating. You're uncomfortably good at it. And now you're the one avoiding the question. So if you don't get there, you won't try to get yourself killed doing whatever you're planning. If I don't get there, then I don't think I'd stand a fraction of a chance, so not much point. Okay then, good. In that case, can't you just wait and see? Even if you do manage it, everyone's placing their faith in how the 3rd wave turns out. Can't you just see how it goes? You want me to wait and see how the wave that killed every other world turns out? Along with the massive loss of life that's going to be tied to it. Yes, I don't care about nameless other people, Ben. I care about you, and when it doesn't sound like you feel confident in your odds at all, how can I be confident either? I may not be confident right now, but I'm going to do everything I can to change that. Planning ahead is my strong suit, and I have nothing but time to get that done. Right, planning ahead is my strong suit. The random thought helped him contextualize the rest of the day he'd gone through. He may have lost miserably on 2 fronts, but he hadn't been playing to his strengths. He hadn't tried to cheat his way to victory, and he didn't have any number of pre-prepared items and weapons to help him. He'd objectively been way too fair, which meant he still had room to improve on either front, a fact Thera hit on when she went on. And today I got a very clear view of how badly things could go when you don't get that planning time. Then I just need to prepare for everything and to show you just how good my problem solving can be, starting with solving our little immortal problem. What, going to kill Rook? Unfortunately, I'm going to have to stick to traumatizing him for now. Killing an immortal is still a little beyond my abilities when they're also immune to harm in general. Of course, I guess I'm going to be putting how much immunity he has to mental harm to the test. You'll see later, it's going to be great. Fine. I'm still really not thrilled to know the sort of danger you're planning on throwing yourself into, Ben. Then let me help you relax. Leaning up to kiss her for whatever distraction it might bring. He did his best to forget about his worries on how he'd handle the future while she tried to focus on how bad his chances of getting what he needed were while the two enjoyed each other's company for some of the night. So, how was meeting the 3rd tiers for the first time? Myriad asked, not sparing Ben a glance while he focused on his work. Well, it turns out the guy who attacked me yesterday was the Immortal, and he tried to kill me again today after he raised a stink trying to get me kicked out of the meeting. Plus I lost a fight to Abel, and given the fact you haven't mentioned her before, I feel compelled to bring up that she's the descendant of an outsider. But otherwise it was pretty good. Myriad crashed down as Ben was talking, creaking out a weak word by the time he was done. Why? Why's she a descendant of an outsider? It's actually really interesting. I was able to pick up the context while I was reading her thoughts, but I really had to read between the lines a bit because it has to do with the sort of ancient history that basically became mythology by the point she heard it, but No, I mean, why do these things keep happening to you? Start with Rook and whatever caused that. No, you already told me what happened yesterday and he has a, well, history of getting in trouble, so I guess it shouldn't be surprising he'd be interested in a woman who both suits his preferences and is part of a long-lived race, but the fact that he's now done it twice is worrying. By virtue of his skills, he's not an easy person to punish, Ben. He's basically out of reach of gods and mortals alike because there's nothing any of us can really do to him. Don't worry. Even if I can't read his mind, he made his weakness overly obvious. I'm sure plenty of others have figured it out too, even if they're less equipped to take advantage of it than me. Which is, watch and see tomorrow. I may not be able to kill the guy, but if you're creative enough, there's fates worse than death. I'll just have to leave a bit early tonight to get started on it. You know what? Fine, I don't care, and more than a few gods would be happy to see him put in his place since he's hard to deal with. And what was that about Abel then? Later. While we're on Rook, I have a couple questions. 1. How old is this bastard? And 2. Are there any other aspects of immortality and absolute defense beyond the obvious? For his age, he must be nearing 1,000, though I'm not sure the exact number of years. Either way, it's been a while. As for skills, I'd say they're both rather straightforward by all accounts. But there was one small quirk of immortality. Quirk? He didn't gain the skill in his mid-20s. By all accounts, he was an old man when he reached it. You've been told before that reaching the 3rd tier can come with some unusual effects compared to a regular awakening, right? Getting that one remodeled his body, bringing him back to his prime. Okay. And now he's hitting on someone centuries younger than him. Gross. Even if I'm not killing him now, I'm gonna have to consider how I might do it in the future. I don't care how good his skill combo is, it can't be invincible. Worry about that later. For now, what were you saying about Abel? Right? It's actually super interesting in a my world really wasn't that bad compared to a lot of the other summons were sort of way. I'm assuming you guys learned at least a little something when you grabbed her soul and the souls of the rest of her kind. You could say that. Frankly, as bad of a situation as they were being brought into, I'm comfortable saying they're better off here than they would have been if they hadn't died the first time. Their entire universe was dying. Post-apocalyptic doesn't begin to describe it. From what I saw in her head, I'm not inclined to disagree, though I'd probably call it grimdark more than anything else, to the point that just how well put together she seems is as strange as her other weirdness. Definitely too bright for that sort of setting. And what exactly does this have to do with her being connected to an outsider? Unauthorized use. This story is on Amazon without permission from the author. Report any sightings. Not just her, all of her kind. Her race, child of Sothith? It's named for one of the outsiders that broke through her universe and mated with anyone who survived witnessing him after he and the others killed the original god of that reality. Not just any god though, but from the context Ben was able to put together from her memories, the closest thing to a capital G god he was aware of. While not omnipotent, it seems like it had been both omnipresent and omniscient in a way the ones of his current reality simply weren't, at least as far as its home reality had been concerned. Similar to the gods of Yuzu's world, the original one of Abel's reality had been a land god, though it had been alone, not even sharing its universe with any other worlds by virtue of the fact that there were none. No stars in the sky and no heavenly body to reside on, the land of that reality was an infinite flat expanse stretching out seemingly forever, both where the people lived and what they worshipped, kept safe by it as well until something it couldn't see broke through from beyond the veil. Hundreds of them flooded through at once, killing the world and then each other until the dozens of outsiders left made an uneasy truce and ruled over the fractured remains of that universe, even warping the races and playing with the corpse of the god they'd slayed. One of those pieces being what gave Abel her weeping, a fragment of the being that should have been her god still crying tears long after its death, either for what happened to it or its people, Ben couldn't say. He explained all of that to Myriad, feeling the cube's energy drain more and more with each word as he finally wrapped up. Really, whatever god grabbed their souls got lucky, Ben shrugged. It looks like she and the others were killed in a bit of interfaith conflict. The fact that they weren't caught or followed back could be viewed as our good fortune, especially since it sounds like the fragment that came with Abel is probably both rare and valuable. I wish you hadn't told me any of that. What am I supposed to do with that information? Ben. Realistically? Nothing. I just thought it was neat. I can't do nothing. You know how much trouble the single outsider that got through caused us, and now you're telling me we have 20 on the world, who share blood with one, and one who's going to become a god of this world eventually. Yeah, but so what? They're their own people, and if they haven't done anything wrong, then who cares about whatever they share some blood with? I can at least say that Abel seems fine, even if a little off. Ugh, there was some talk about what was going to happen when she ascends in proper. Given she has a wholly unique attribute, there was obviously curiosity, especially from the knowledge gods. But what am I supposed to do with this information? Again, nothing. It's not like the attribute comes from the outsiders, it comes from a corpse. Oh, because that's so much better. I mean, I think so. There's still the issue of her skills then. They've always been strange, but knowing they come from her bloodline is significantly worse, and given ascending means she'll be able to create and gift skills to others, then this world really could fill with people holding outsider abilities. And once more, so what? As far as I can see, except for her outer ancestry, she doesn't have much that looks like it strains reality, and everything else looks useful. Seriously, don't sweat the small stuff, and if it's such a big deal, then just keep it to yourself. No reason to get the other gods in a huff about her existence. They're too reactionary about nothing most of the time anyway. Fine, you know what? Whatever. Just don't mention this to Hellori then. If she finds out I heard about this and didn't tell her, she isn't going to let it go. Yeah, can do. Good. And in that case, anything else about the meeting I should know about? Doubt it, it was pretty chaotic, but I'm assuming you're aware of all of the big parts. You know one of the summoned killed 10 others. I'm aware. It was unfortunate. PFF. Funny way of calling a big blunder. Seriously, who thought it would be a good idea to bring two separate sides of a war? Didn't look around here and realize what a terrible idea that was going to be. It wasn't ideal, and after it happened we knew there could be some friction. But we never predicted that there'd be a third tier on one of the sides. Hell, we didn't predict we'd get any third tiers. In the few worlds such a spell had been used in the past, there's never been anyone who ascended to godhood after they died. We got exceptionally lucky with who we got. Lucky you. So what's the take from everyone up here? To defer the problem until after the war. Down there. The same. As above, so below, I guess. I just keep being proven right again and again that there's no meaningful difference between gods and mortals. Well, whatever you say. And are you really going to be fine tomorrow? I'd really rather you not be around someone who's already attacked you twice. Myriad, don't worry. I'm not the sort who lets that sort of thing go unpunished, so if you're really worried, just watch. Oh, hell yes. Looking at his card early in the morning, the first thing he noticed was that he'd finally got what he'd been hoping for in the form of a single job level. It may have taken ages to get compared to how much he'd usually manage in the same time frame, but it validated the strategy he was operating under, confirming that once he got it done, he'd be flying through the rest of his jobs. Just 3 more levels. He told himself. 3 more levels and I break the job system in its entirety. Okay, when I get back to Stonewall, I'm spending even more hours in the shop with my jacket and pushing my soul to the limits to make as many souls as possible to get through this. If I get another level of Soul Source 2, then it will get even faster, and then, no, worry about that later. First, I need to finish surviving this meeting, which means off to Yuzu. It was early enough in the morning that he scribbled Thera a note telling her he'd meet them in the meeting before heading off, walking through largely empty streets to the gate before passing through beyond to All Faith, arriving at a familiar doorstep before being let in. It was one of the house servants who greeted him and led him to a seating area, letting him wait until Jake and Yuzu came out, looking groggy. Buddy, what are you doing here this early? Jake yawned. Not that it's not great seeing you, but I haven't been allowed a ton of rest recently, so waking up early isn't great. Sorry. I'm not sure if Yuzu mentioned it to you, but long story short, someone tried to murder me a couple times and I want to borrow your mind and soul quickly to get my revenge. What? He turned to Yuzu, watching her give a tired nod as Jake shook off some of his sleep to give in. Okay, you got it, man, do what you need to do. And do you need any help beyond that? I wouldn't mind tagging along if you need to beat someone up. Thanks, but I want to handle this myself. I'll be real quick about it. Forming the connection and strengthening the other's mind, Ben materialized the handful of stuff he needed before immediately going to alter the shape of the Voidstone he now held, working the material to try and speed up its production of condensed spacetime so he'd be able to begin his main project. You're the best. I'll get out of your hair for now then. MMH, try not to get murdered. Hold on a moment. I'll walk back with you, Yuzu told him. I need to go that way anyway. I might as well make sure you aren't attacked when you get back. In that case, I'll take you up on that. Jake went off to get what bits of sleep he could while Yuzu changed, eventually coming back and letting them head off, chatting while Ben worked. So, what are you making this time? She asked as he shaped his enchantments, watching through her mana sense as he constructed and deconstructed them again and again on the powerful material, trying to shape them perfectly for whatever desires he held. Oh, this and that, he evaded. Probably something super ethical. Maybe even the most ethical enchantment that's ever existed. Just tell me if you're going to somehow murder an immortal with that or not. Murder? Absolutely not. I'm a sweet little peace-loving guy. This is just a handy tool for me to put people who don't share that sentiment into a timeout. Okay, sure. And are you doing okay? You didn't seem great yesterday, but you look a bit brighter now. I'm probably fine. I talked about some things going on in life with Thera, and it helped, even if she wasn't thrilled about some of it. MMH, I can see why you'd stress her out. Things really would be a lot easier if you just went home. Maybe, but easier doesn't necessarily mean better. Now, just 1 second. I'm going to concentrate for a bit. He had the item shaped the way he wanted, looking like an almost perfect sphere with a single flattened side with a rainbow mana crystal heart to power it, leaving him only to confirm the enchanting structure he wanted to apply to it as he went, with his earlier experimentation narrowing down the final selection of skills and configurations he would go for as he got to work putting it together. To get the effect he wanted, the enchantments needed to be dense and beyond perfect. By any reasonable measure, everything he made could be called perfect by anyone but the crafting gods, but he was at a stage where he needed to be redefining what perfection even meant with his work. Enchantments that would make every other person with the skill beyond himself and his teacher froth with envy at the talent behind them were discarded and replaced, being remade again and again until they met his standards while minutes ticked by. To an outsider observer, it all had to look incredibly fast, but when he was creating them as quickly as he could think, it became clear the level of care they were each getting, with his mana draining faster than he could get it back despite the normally low cost. He was challenging himself with the thing he wanted to create, and as the last enchantment went down, his efforts bore fruit. A case of content theft. This narrative is not rightfully on Amazon. If you spot it, report the violation. See? He turned to her proudly. If I took the easy way and didn't seek revenge, I wouldn't be able to reap the benefits of it. MMH. And am I supposed to ignore both your awakening and the last skill you just leveled with the rest of them? I'd appreciate that, yes. He told her as he admired his latest creation, a happy smile on his face as he did. Just looking at it, those levels felt deserved, not just for the undeniable skill his eyes were telling him he pulled off, but also for the brief bit of system information he got with it. He'd just created his second high legendary item. Arguably, it could even be considered his first. While his jacket had reached that same stage, that was thanks to the thousands upon thousands of souls he had imprisoned within it, essentially forcing up its ranking by virtue of how ridiculous it was. This, though, was different. It existed purely through regular efforts that had been honed to an outrageous degree, elevating him all the higher with his success. Admittedly, I still have the benefit of having been able to make it with an enchanting medium that nobody else can currently access, but that's still fine seeing as how I discovered it. Plus, if I'm able to make any more high legendary items in the future on more normal materials, then that's just another threshold broken and another reason to celebrate. Considering that he'd created it entirely motivated by his desire to get revenge, perhaps excitement wasn't the most proper emotion, but he couldn't help it. Not just for the levels or the ranking itself, but also what it symbolized. In a way, Ben had just surpassed his teacher. Before Falk had risen to the level of a soul mage, he'd told Ben that he could regularly create lower legendary items and sometimes middle ones, but never high. By managing such a thing himself, he'd gone beyond the Yeti, even if Falk had only grown into another wall for him to aim for. And so long as I awaken connect and my enchanting properly merges into it. Okay, that's a future thing to look forward to, but for now, I need to plant my little trap. With that done, he materialized both a piece of paper and a simple light before pressing them to the flat end of his new tool, and watched as they disappeared while he and Yuzu walked out front of where the meeting was going to be held, still having plenty of time before it was to start, and chatted to pass the time. By all accounts, that was what it would look like to any outside observer too, just a casual conversation between friends, but that was far from the whole story. While one of his minds focused on Yuzu, living at the normal speeds of reality to talk, the rest were pushing to their limits to take in and process every bit of sensory data he could. Deep connection was stretched out as far as it could reach, letting him look through the eyes of not only Yuzu but also everyone else who came his way to try and catch any glimpse he could of the other coming in the distance, while he prepared for even the slightest hit of a breeze to tell him that air had been displaced behind him, getting both after only a little while of waiting. He saw Rook round a corner out of the eyes of a passerby and watched as the man realized that neither he nor Yuzu had seen him, with the immortal almost looking giddy as he disappeared, the small puff of air being displaced as he teleported, telling Ben he was at his back and letting him do something his harasser never expected. He reacted, pushing his body beyond its limits by trying to make it move at the speeds he could think. Ben reached behind him while Rook reached out, completely taking the other off guard as the item he'd made pressed into the immortal's open hand and activated before any spells could be cast, leaving the muscles in Ben's limb mangled from the outrageous strain but his back safe, with the man who'd decided to be nothing but a pain to him nowhere to be seen. Ben, what the hell was that? Just put him in a timeout, it's fine. Anyway, Yuzu, while you're conveniently here, mind fixing my arm? Not to exaggerate, but it kind of hurts. Yeah, that looks like an understatement, she said as she reached out. How are you taking it so well when you don't have pain resistance? What can I say? I may not be resisting the pain, but I'm kind of used to it at this level. It really sucks, but I'm regulating a couple of my minds to deal with it, so they're just screaming in my head while the rest get to focus on day-to-day life. You really do say concerning things sometimes. You know that? Just gotta accept reality for what it is. It wasn't long before she had him back in peak condition though, and he stretched and flexed his arm for good measure, not feeling any lingering damage by the time both Thera and Falk finally arrived. My lovely girlfriend and my lovely teacher, perfect timing, he called out. Good news and other good news. Rook is sorted out and I also made something new. Falk, come over and give it a look. Even from a distance, the Yeti's eyes were telling him the ranking, and it only made him quicken his pace as he took the ball from his apprentice's hand, rolling it around in his own while he looked it over before breaking into a laugh. This do what I think? I'd say probably. Well, that's one way to deal with an immortal, probably the best way too for now. You'll have to tell me about the details later, but for now we should head in. Yeah, sounds good. Thera stepped in line beside him as the four went in, looking at the thing he held. So what did you make this time? I'll tell you later. I actually have one more thing I'll need to do with it after the meeting, so be prepared then, you're gonna love it. Well, if it got him out of our hair then sure. While Falk took his seat and the other attendees began streaming in behind him, the room quickly filled up, with Abel wildly waving at them from the side and seeming to pay no mind to what bit of decorum the rest of them showed by the time the last two arrived, with Killy dragging Verbum with her as the other tried to fight. It was clear it was a losing battle though, and eventually he gave in to his fate, instead making his way over to Ben, grabbing his shoulders and giving voice to his displeasure. I've never been so betrayed. Huh, by who? You. How could you just leave me with her yesterday? Huh? Do you know how scary she is? Wait, Verbum. Does that mean you're more comfortable with me? A man I didn't know. Does this mean you're finally accepting me in your heart as your friend? I'm accepting you in my heart as the lesser evil. Close enough. Either way though, I'm sorry man. I got in a bit of a funk and didn't think about how you'd feel when you woke up. That was inconsiderate of me. The genuine apology seemed to catch the other entirely off guard, stunning him for a second and leaving him to mutter before taking his seat. Just don't do it again then. Got it. I'll bring you something tasty next time I swing by the library to make up for it. And then I suppose we're just waiting on one, Killy said as she looked around. preparing to start things for the day before Ben raised his hand. "Ah, we won't be. I guess he didn't tell you, but Rook found me yesterday to say how sorry he felt for his actions and that he was going to be gone for a while to self-reflect on the sort of person he is and wants to be. He won't be at the meeting today." Not one person there believed it, and more than a few began to speak up at what a ridiculous notion such a thing was, but after looking in his eyes for a moment, Killy only nodded. "Well then, here's hoping he takes plenty of time to reflect, but since that means he's not here, let's get started with what should have been the main event of yesterday as we welcome 2 new members of our tier, being the world's newest soulsmith along with the King of Growth. Ask questions, get acquainted, and figure out how we can all work together for the good of the world." A brief flash of disorientation, and Rook didn't know where he was. One moment he was walking to another boring meeting when he got what felt like a bit of luck. He wasn't used to being so disrespected, and seeing the brat alone without the princess around to save him felt like the perfect way to kill some stress and finally get a chance to turn the girl to a better option. He would teleport behind him and then teleport the guy farther into the deeps, with the water hopefully serving the goal of getting him out of his way, and failing that, letting the currents do it for him. It was what he'd intended at least, but what he got was the nearly instantaneous sight of the other man's arm warping backwards, pressing something into him and leaving him somewhere new and unfamiliar. Of course, it would have been utterly impossible to call wherever he'd ended up a normal location when he was inside what by all accounts looked like an endless black void, the only things it held being him, a small light and a sheet of paper. Both things he instantly ignored in favor of trying to get away. He didn't know what sort of trap he'd fallen into, but he wasn't a space mage for nothing. It was the skill he trained in the most to ensure he'd always be able to escape a hint of trouble if need be, and he instantly put it to the test as he reached out with his mana, trying to feel beyond the confines of his strange prison but coming back with more than nothing. Not just an unseen wall and not an endless void either. As he stretched out his mana, he felt it coming back at him, destroying his sense of scale and giving him no way to judge the size of his confines. Impossible. It didn't make sense, which meant there was some trick to it. He just needed to find it. There was no such thing as a room without end, and even if he was being suspended in the air, he could still propel himself with his power, moving out for what could only have been a few feet before his perspective changed, bringing him back to face the light and the letter once more. "I'm being teleported," he finally said, feeling like he'd gotten the trick of it and only growing in his rage for that fact. "That brat thinks he can best me, a 9th-leveled space mage, with some cheap enchantment of my magic. That bastard! How dare he, when I get out of here?" His mutterings went on while he went, straining space itself in every way he could think to and failing again and again, still not understanding its construction, nor how it was keeping him in place, endlessly looping him back again. He didn't feel any magic in the act but knew that had to come down to a matter of skill in the enchantment, even if he didn't want to acknowledge it, but that skill only went so far. He may not have known much, but he knew that an enchanter needed to hold the magic they were aiming to enchant with, and if the brat had held space magic at a high level, he wouldn't have needed to be saved each time Rook attacked him. He was obviously on the low end, no matter how much he was able to compensate it by having his enchanting awakened, which meant it couldn't actually be that powerful, only being a matter of breaking his way out. That meant overpowering it, and as much as he didn't want to, Rook sat after that, letting his mana regenerate all he could before striking out with a far grander attack, trying to break beyond space itself and still coming up empty, leaving him on the edge of mana exhaustion with nothing to show for it. Not wanting to pass out, feeling like it would be playing entirely into the other's hands, he finally gave in and did the only thing he could do, reaching out to grab the letter, reading it by the small light for whatever clues it might contain. "My dear Rook, if you're reading this, that means you haven't given up. You couldn't accept that you've been rejected, well, that you never had a chance with Thera to begin with, and you continued to refuse to act your age, so as the more responsible one between the two of us, I've made the difficult choice to place you in a timeout for a while. How long is a while, I hear you asking as you read this? Well, it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks, and you happen to be a very, very old dog, so I've decided that a week of nothing to do but float and reflect would be for the best. As someone who's been trapped before as well, I'd say to hold on to this letter no matter how much you want to tear it up. Eventually, this is going to be the only bit of stimulus you're going to have, so you better appreciate it. Now, if you make the very inadvisable decision to ignore this by the time you get out, To attack me and make an attempt on my life, or to harass Thera some more, then you will live to regret it for one simple reason. I know what you fear. Stolen content warning. This content belongs on Royal Road. Report any occurrences. It doesn't help that you made it obvious. With space magic being the only skill you have above the 7th level, despite having had centuries to grow into something that could actually help the world, given what you knew had to be coming, tied into the fact that you stepped back when Thera threatened to hit you into space. You fear the only thing it makes sense for an immortal to fear, being stranded. So this is what's going to happen. I could threaten to put you in something like this permanently, but that would honestly be too boring. What I am going to threaten you with is this. Not only if you do the things I've already said, if I die in any way other than old age, I will be calling in a favor from the Great Space Spirit. If you know anything about Great Spirits, you know how powerful they are, so you know your own pathetically low magic won't stack up. What I will be asking him to do in the event of my demise is simple as well. All he's going to do is teleport you into the heart of a star. Now, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt that you at least know a thing or two about stars. One being the size. Given you can only teleport a few hundred meters, that you can see while this world's sun makes the planet look like a pebble in comparison, you should be able to understand you're never getting out of it. Trapped forever in an elemental forge, unable to escape. I must confess, just the thought makes me curious enough to ask the space spirit to do it way sooner, just to test the limits of your skills. I won't, of course, I'm far too polite and well-mannered, but it would be interesting to know if even that isn't enough to reach the limits of your skills. Oh, I hope it's not, and the fact that you'd have your pair working together really leads me to believe it won't be. I'd rather that not turn into a chance for you to escape into true godhood. As I write this, just to be safe, I'll be asking them to make sure they don't pick the sun. They'll be finding the coolest star they can, relatively of course, in the deadest region of space, so that even if you do somehow escape or ascend, you won't be finding others anytime soon. You will be alone with nothing but yourself to blame. Oof, I got a little heavy there at the end, didn't I? Sorry. I'm prone to both curiosity and getting passionate on the things that interest me, so why don't we end on a different note? Now, as you can see, there's no food or water for you, but honestly, if an immortal can die from those lacks, then you really don't deserve the name, so that's not a major concern, and although you're in an enclosed space, I'm sure running out of air won't be a major issue for you either. Whatever changes your body went through will probably be able to make do one way or another, but absolute defense is a whole other issue. See, I must confess that a couple of my skills don't work on you because of it. It's a little annoying, but I can't help but wonder how far it goes. It seems like your body, soul, and mind are all protected, which means it lives up to its name, but it's the final aspect we're going to look at. You're immune to mental attacks, but does it leave you immune to the damage of your own mental processes? Trapped with nothing else to do, will it keep you from falling into hallucinations and nightmares? Will it keep you sane, even if that means it keeps you from escaping the reality of the situation you've been placed in? I am genuinely so excited to find out. You'll have to let me know, but look at how long this has gotten. I've rambled long enough, so let me end things here. Be well and do your best to reflect on the way a person facing eternity should act. Lots of love, Ben Hef. Crumpling the paper as soon as he was done, Rook didn't give in. It was obviously left there to scare him, to make him believe trying to escape was pointless, but he wouldn't accept it. And it was like the brat had said in the letter. He was immortal, meaning he had all of the time in the world to get out. The fact that he'd so easily narrowed in on something that went beyond his fears was an issue, but it was one he could deal with, especially when it was so obviously a bluff. The world had no great space spirit. Even people with only a superficial knowledge of the powerful forces that made up the planet were aware of that, meaning it was nothing but an attempt to scare him. At most, he'd be able to get the Archmage to do something, but even then, she wouldn't be able to carry out the threat he'd just made. It was nonsense. No, he couldn't let himself be tricked, meaning that he had to get out to kill him. It didn't matter how long it would take. He'd make it happen. At some point, he'd accepted the mana exhaustion. It didn't last long for him. As soon as he got a single point, he was awake again, unlike most people, and he kept letting his pool fill up again and again before emptying it in its entirety, doing everything he could think to break free and not caring how often he failed. At least that was what he was telling himself, but with each attempt ending the same as the last, his heart started to tighten, telling him he really was going to be trapped there. But who cares? He told himself after the dozenth attempt. It's only a week. I'll get out of here and then I'll make him regret ever coming to the world. Just you wait. His thoughts were cut off by the first change since he'd gotten there with the light turning off. Something that shouldn't have been surprising, it had been running for hours and he hadn't refilled the mana that powered it in that time, but it left him to fumble around for a bit until he could find it in the pitch black until he eventually grabbed hold of and poured his mana in. An action that got him nothing. Not a flicker of light. Not a speck of illumination. The world around him stayed dark with the enchantment that had been placed on it broken. In that situation, with no way to escape and no stimulation beyond himself, Rook finally screamed. Whistling a cheery tune as they flew across the ocean on a bed of sand, Ben couldn't help but feel satisfied. The meeting had stretched out late, but that was more a side effect of how smoothly it had gone overall, with the world's two newest third tiers getting acquainted with the rest of them as they discussed ways they might be able to help each other and the world as a whole through their power, with Killy leading the group and hitting every point she'd wanted to a day early, leaving her looking tremendously pleased by the end. He wasn't going to act like Rook was the only unruly element among the third tiers, but he was a big enough one that just the lack of his presence alone had made things easier, letting them wrap up and get back to their work and their lives. As for whether either Ben or Thera had gotten anything out of it, only Ben felt like that was the case. As interesting as some of the talks had been and getting to learn the names and dispositions of some of the most powerful people on the planet, what he'd gotten was experience, placing his strength against their own to see where he'd stack against a few of them, and despite how low it was, he'd at least seen he could plan around it to an extent, giving him just a little hope for the future. "All right, is this out far enough for you?" Thera asked him while Ben looked around. It had been over 10 minutes since they'd seen land in any direction. Exactly what he was looking for as he nodded. "Yep, just 1 second." Taking out Rook's prison and holding it in his hand, Ben first spent his mana, wrapping the thing in a thick layer of steel before dropping it into the sea below, sighing contently as he did. "Ah, now that felt good," he said as he got up, wrapping his arms around Thera as he did. "You ready to go home?" "As I'm going to be. This was not supposed to be such a stressful outing. I mean, technically we didn't know how stressful it was going to be beforehand since Falk never told us. Not important. I just want to get a nice couple of days where nothing goes wrong for once. Saying that's a jinx, we're going to go home and find Stonewall overrun by demons now. Well, luckily for Stonewall, it's home to the beloved daughter of the great Earth Spirit. Plenty of the other spirits are going to be protecting it while I'm not around. Is calling yourself the beloved daughter of the great Earth Spirit really less embarrassing than calling yourself the Spirit Princess? Yep, now don't question that anymore if you don't want to fall into the ocean too. Okay. I'll be a good cute little boyfriend and just quietly take in the view. Huh? Restraint? Oh, the letter. You saw that, huh? Taken from Royal Road. This narrative should be reported if found on Amazon. Yeah, but you didn't speak up. Okay, so here's the thing, I lied. Mainly the length of time he could expect to be trapped in there. I do still plan on talking to Ogilt though. Well, here's the thing, I actually built the enchantments to decay and calculated their decay rate to figure out how long he'd be trapped. But I'm just so good at enchanting, you know? Literally the second best on the planet. All of my enchantments want to be strong and stable, especially since they all incorporate the ring system, and that's kind of that system's defining feature. Fine, it's going to be roughly 6 months of real time just to really get the message across, you know? He literally tried to kill me. He literally tried to kill me? 6 months is a pretty short prison time considering the charge is attempted murder, isn't it? Agree to disagree. Anyway, he's immortal, that will all probably be fine, and since that would be fine, I just did my best to extend things as much as I could to really get the point across. Now, obviously, he needs to act as a meat shield by the time the third wave rolls around, so I couldn't justify actually keeping him in there past the third wave, but through the clever addition of time enchantments I can sure make it feel like it's longer. Not that much. So the interesting thing about what I did was that I warped space itself to make his prison, meaning that teleporting out of it would be close to the same as teleporting out of reality. Obviously not exactly the same, I wouldn't be able to trap Ogilt like that, but even someone in the middle of an awakened space magic would probably feel trapped. Now, he has about 3 meters of space in all directions, but since space is also warping back in on itself, it could also be described as infinite, complicating things a bit more. Fine, 3 times faster. 6 months in there translates to about a year and a half. I can be both curious and annoying. Hey, nobody should be mad about this. I'm basically doing him a service by helping the guy remember something it seems like he's long forgotten. Fear. A guy with all the time in the world and no motivation to use it beyond being creepy to women and a bastard to the people around him. That sort of thing would be far better suited to self-improvement. Even if it's too little, too late, considering we're reaching the end of the invasion, maybe we'll get lucky and he'll use this chance to get motivated enough in his training to actually awaken his space magic. You gotta admit, being nearly 1,000 and not having dozens of awakened skills is a little embarrassing. Yep, absolutely left him with a light because I have a sweet, merciful heart. So there we go, all's well that ends well. I would now stop sweating the small stuff, man. It's time to go home. Getting home that evening after a far too eventful number of days away, the first thing they found when getting back was Sonia, passed out on the couch after having finally made her own return from the hospital she'd been working with, making Thera hold a finger to her lips. I'm sure she's been worked hard this whole time, so if she's asleep, I'm going to turn in early too. If you're going to stay up, can you try and keep quiet? No worries, he whispered back. I was thinking I'd head back to the shop after you went asleep anyway, so I'll just go now to get some work done. I'll come back to cook breakfast in the morning. MMH, you really do need to rest too, you know? Who needs sleep when I've got stamina for days? Besides, I've made progress on my job, so I want to get back to working on my materialization and I have a few other things to test too. Just make sure you take a break from time to time or I'm dragging you back. Yes, ma'am, no worries. It should only take me a couple weeks to finish this. Less if I really push myself. And man, do I plan on pushing myself. Sure, the more mana he pulled into himself to make souls with, the better the odds that he'd injure his own, but with the progress it offered him, how could he resist? A question Thera could see that the answer was clearly he wouldn't. Just try not to get injured in ways I can't heal. You got it. He kissed her goodbye from there and ran off, making his way to the shop despite its late hour and immediately sliding back into his jacket, feeling well at home. Oh yeah, that's the stuff, he muttered to himself before beginning the far less enjoyable act of connecting with it, pulling the mana it held to start materializing thousands of souls for the experience it would give him, while the question of how to otherwise spend the night stayed in his thoughts. He had his projects, of course, from the summoning spell to Onyx to the more recent one he was failing at in the form of creating a tool that could materialize by itself, but he'd come across a more recent problem he wanted to look at first. Namely, testing the limits of some of his skills. It wasn't always the easiest thing to do, either from the ethical reasons that stemmed from how hard it was to use hive mind on anyone for any reason other than trying to help the former prisoners of OWN, to the more practical problems of either not knowing what to test or how to expand on areas in the case of his soul source. The latter especially he wanted to expand on a bit if he could. It was now a skill he used almost constantly for the mountains of experience creating a soul gave him, but progress was slow. He would experiment as he did it, of course. Even then, as thousands were coming in and out of existence, no two were the same, and some things he attempted resulted in no soul being created at all, but he wasn't sure what to do with the skill beyond what he'd already discovered, with there being a limit in that too. Since awakening the skill, he hadn't been able to grow the proportion of mana they would hold. Sure, as he grew his own pool, their maximum grew as well, but he was still only able to create anything with half of what he held. Speaking of some fundamental rule or limit to souls he just didn't understand. It was an annoyance but not a major problem, and more importantly, it wasn't what he intended to look at that night. No, that right was reserved for a skill he'd recently used to save his life, esoteric actualization. Without the urgency that came with testing it while he plummeted through the air, Ben once more tried to make a naked force, something he could use to push or pull something to him as one would if they held telekinesis, only to fail no matter what he tried it on. He couldn't use it on himself, he couldn't use it on something like a hammer, and no matter how small he tried to force it on, it simply wouldn't work. Not even dust shifted under the weight of his mind, telling him that for whatever reason, even if he could move things he was actualizing, he couldn't move any genuine bit of reality. The skill simply didn't work like that. Given that failure, he instead used the skill in a way he knew it would work, creating a hammer with it and feeling the weight of it in his grasp. He knew that if he let it, the thing would disappear as if it had never been there to begin with. its existence guaranteed only as long as he willed it to be, but what mattered then was what he could do with such a thing while it did exist. He'd already seen that even if it was poorly, he could carry his own weight, but in what other ways could he influence the world? Stolen from its rightful author, this tale is not meant to be on Amazon. Report any sightings. With the hammer being the perfect way to test it. Holding it in his grasp, he went to the forge to heat up some iron before beating it into shape, feeling every strike with it flaring up as a brief but sharp headache each time, telling him that even with his most recent level, the cost of that skill hadn't changed. It was still a mind skill, as strange as it was to consider it like that, and it still had a cost that meant he couldn't replace the tools in his life entirely with mental constructs, and he couldn't help but pinch his brow as he looked it over. Jake was right when he said this was like a psychic power. It follows its own rules, and I don't know how it interacts with the broader universe as a whole. I'm probably going to stumble on a couple more aspects of it that I can't think to test too. There's just too much I don't know. Man, I'll at least admit that this one is a weird skill. Although it's not like it's my only one. If we're talking psychic powers, then Connect is going to count too, since it's powered by my soul instead of having a mana cost. Hell, based on what I know about it, since it works by linking my soul with another's instead of having another medium to go through, doesn't that mean if I somehow wound up back on Earth I'd still be able to use it? Or in any life-bearing universe in that case, if it's a place where souls exist, then it's a place that Connect should function in theory. Now that feels a little weird to think about. Okay, I'm getting off track. I need to do a bit more tests. I'd still be curious about going into the Gate network and feeding an insect a bunch of materialized seeds to see if it would starve to death or properly replace its body with actualized atoms, and if that would translate to an actualized construct that could house a soul. But that's a future problem. For now, I want to... Wait, now there's something to test. Could a construct hold a soul? It was something worth looking into, and the idea opened up plenty more to test as well. Given that whenever he went to his god's realm, he was in essence controlling something he was actualizing with his own, would such a thing be possible down below? The only way to know was to try, so pushing his thoughts to the limit, Ben actualized a replica of himself, as perfect as could be, before reaching out to try and connect with it like he would any homunculus, only to fail in the end. It wasn't surprising, even if it was disappointing. While he didn't know the exact process of how he'd create a body for himself when he went up a realm, with the entire process being at best subconscious, the mortal realm seemed like it would be different right off the bat. With the biggest problem being that even if it looked like himself, it wasn't actually a body. Ben didn't know his own biology down to an atomic level. While he was uncomfortably aware of some of his physiology's finer structures thanks both to the disastrous final floor of the Life Tower, as well as looking at himself through Thera's eyes when she used her mana examination, there were emergent systems and finer rules his body operated on that he wasn't an expert on and couldn't replicate. That meant he was going to be continuing to rely on Thera for any and all future clones, but a living body wasn't the only way to hold a soul, something he was already well aware of as he actualized the molecular structure of Rainbow Mana Crystal as he understood it, another question coming with it. Is this thing going to absorb mana? It was a casual mutter, not something he expected to get a positive answer to, but still one worth testing as he materialized some more Busual to set it and attach to a simple light enchantment, getting nothing but surprise when it actually worked. I have no clue what to do with this piece of information. It seemed like it could be handy in some way, leaving only the question of how. He wouldn't need to have any of the real crystal on him in an emergency to take advantage of it, but considering he could already materialize it, that wasn't the biggest issue. Perhaps if he needed an unreasonable volume of it that exceeded the limits of his mana, then it would be worthwhile, but even then he had some in his spatial rings, leaving the discovering feeling more like a novelty than anything else as he filed it away for later, moving on to his next test from there as he materialized a soul within it. And again it worked, defying his expectations as the soul he materialized held within the barely existent crystal as it began absorbing mana from the environment, letting him grab it for himself. Okay, this could maybe be useful? God, I don't know, we'll see. So next test. With what felt like the stranger idea out of the way, he moved on, trying to actualize all sorts of things to see if there were any limits there and finding none, even with something else piquing his interest. Making a cube of ice, his conception of such a thing detailed down to its molecular structure. He let it melt in his hand, watching as it changed to water while his flesh chilled under its touch until he thought he'd gotten everything he'd wanted from it and felt he was done. letting it vanish but losing something else with it, the feeling of cold that had transferred to his flesh. That demands some more experimentation. The fact that he'd just lost the sensation of cold with it told him there was even more he didn't understand about what was happening when he used the skill and switched to trying to actualize boiling water, maintaining it while he dipped a thin iron wire into it and feeling the heat travel up until he once more released the actualization, the temperature vanishing with it yet again. Again it left him confused with more tests following. Actualizing just plain water and boiling it left the things that were boiled within it losing their heat when he stopped, and he couldn't use his actualization to change the temperatures of items that genuinely existed, all of it leading to only a single conclusion. This skill is weird as hell. It continued to fit the name esoteric to a T, with those few discoveries showing him some of the finer rules the skill played on, even if it lacked the underlying logic behind it, and with him already so far he continued on his testing through the night, looking for what secrets he might unlock. He went home in the morning like he said he would, quietly cooking breakfast for everyone and letting the smell do its job of rousing the two women while he began plating up, watching as both came out and wiped the sleep from their eyes. "Welcome home, Sonia. Did you just get back?" "MMH yesterday. I only meant to have a seat, but guess I was more worn out than I'd thought. Things were a lot worse than I was expecting. And you two? Both safe?" "As you can see," Ben shrugged, getting a deeply exasperated look from Thera for it. "I've been safe. Ben was kidnapped for a month, and then after we went out with Uncle someone kept trying to kill him. And yet I'm still safe. Maybe the two of you could catch me up." It was clear plenty had gone on, so they filled Sonia in on all that had happened since the start of the second wave, hearing what she'd been up to in return. Even if not as extreme, she'd been dealing with nothing but constant work for over a month. Dealing with the constant flow of people and bodies that were still arriving to that day as the world dealt with the horde that had made its way through. "That may have been the first proper bit of sleep I've had that entire time," she ended with a stretch. "Getting these bracelets dropped my workload enough that I was finally able to come home. The fact that you made them isn't the most shocking, but I'm still going to have to be going back pretty constantly, so I'll be making good use of your mini-gates. As it stands, I'll probably be back home most nights. I just won't be around for much of the day otherwise. Auntie, you need rest too. Who doesn't? But I can't just not work, and it's not like the two of you aren't busy too." Ben had his goals, and Thera still traveled constantly to various hospitals and clinics to work. All of their time was constantly full, even if Ben's mana bracelets had dropped the overall workload for healers across the planet. "Bracelets I need to keep making more of since there's so many freaking mages on this planet. Okay. That's work today sorted and my soul drastically overfilled again." With the workload never ending, they parted after breakfast. Ben returning to the shop he'd just left to get back to it. "Meals are my most important breaks. It doesn't matter how much I have to do before the year is up. I'm not going to give up too much time for the people I love. If I fail and die at the end anyway, I know I'll regret it. Oh, absolutely, this is just the lesser evil for me. Anyway, do you need anything, or is it back to work for me? You could be reading stolen content. Head to Royal Road for the genuine story. Seriously? Score. Okay, these days are about to fly by." It let him walk into work with a spring in his step. The knowledge that the reward for his work was so close couldn't help but excite him as he imagined it. Quillith had already told him about a few of the mythic items the world held in the past, and Ben had directly seen two with his own eyes, being both the Talos and the Archive, but he couldn't help but want to see more of what was possible when one reached the higher levels of quality that existed within the universe. It immediately captured his imagination and took up a significant portion of his thoughts that weren't devoted to any of his materialization as he worked, even if the thoughts brought another thing to the forefront of his consciousness as he began to speak aloud. "Hey Quillith and any other watching Grey. Your favorite human is alive and well, and waiting to hear why I haven't gotten any more meetings if anyone wants to pop out to chat." The question was met with silence, nobody coming out to greet him or give him any sort of explanation that left him to shrug as he focused on his work, feeling his soul pushed to its limits as millions of points of mana passed through him until he decided to take a break for another piece of work. Even if the souls he made couldn't surpass his own limits, their total mana still grew with his own, and with just how much growing he'd done in the past month, he went back to his jacket and began replacing what each crystal within it held, putting in new souls and exploding up the mana volume of his most important outfit from 60 million to just over 140, leaving a grin stretched across his face and a notification ringing out in his head. Okay. As convenient as that was, I'm not redoing this. His total mana volume had just increased significantly, but more importantly, he could now hold more within himself while creating more souls, meaning that he was going to be getting through his last few levels all the faster, combined with his improved proficiency in making them. All of it tying into Ben fantasizing about the future. Whenever he got to his final job level, he'd give it a day or two before putting in a request for every person with the adventurer's job he could get, along with both mages and mind users, to succeed in his ultimate dream of all but obliterating the job system to claim every drop of power from it he could. He'd get skill and attribute bonuses out the wazoo along with levels in droves, probably a few completely new skills as well. And hopefully good ones. I've been really lucky with pretty much all of the last few ones I've gotten from taking jobs. Even if I don't care about my inclinations too much, it's better to have them, and soul inclination has paid off at least by lowering my mana cost for making souls. Sure wish I could figure out how to awaken it to get it even lower, but that will hopefully happen sooner than later. No, the real stars of the show are Defiler of Ambrosia and especially modifier compatibility. If I could get a single new skill that existed at the same scale as either of them, then it would make my entire life. With how many jobs I have, it's not like it's unreasonable to hope that one of the stranger ones might help me get something good, right? There were admittedly some concerns to worry about too, even if the good outweighed it by so much that it wasn't going to hold him back. Beyond just the basic fear of getting something comparable to flavor enhancement again, after how badly taking Alien Mind had gone for him, he really did need to worry a bit about how they might make things grow and change too, no matter how non-existent the risk it supposedly was, with one sticking out as a greater concern. Outsider. It was a job he had his hopes about, thinking it was the most likely of what he had left to give him third-tier bonuses, but there were some pretty clear worries to be had about it too. He may have gotten the job as an option before he'd stared into the chaos, but he could still feel it scratching at the walls of his mind, his consciousness affected by it in ways he still didn't fully understand, and still left him feeling ill if he focused too heavily on it, even if he was no longer at the point of vomiting any time it passed through his head. And tied into my witness blessing. Yeah, I still have a few weeks until this might become a problem, but I'll need to make sure I have both the archive and some good healers around me when I do, maybe even a soul mage to be on the safe side. Oh well, I'll worry about that later. For now, it looks like I've got company. His earlier call seemed to have been answered. No longer alone, Ben faced the Grey who joined him. Apologies for the delay, Quillith said, gently bowing his head. As I'm sure you can imagine, rearranging a schedule when someone comes back to life isn't the easiest thing, especially when we didn't immediately notice you lived. No worries, almost dying is inconvenient for a lot of people. He shrugged. So how have you been? Did I miss any exciting news? A bit. Shall I go through your usual reading and update you? Sounds good. Taking a seat, the Grey brought up all of the new information they'd learned about the universe in a series of rapidly switching slides, letting Ben take it all in while they talked. We still haven't found a world we'd want to talk to if your planet fails, he admitted. It's a big universe. There's probably plenty that would meet our desires and be willing to help us, but it's a matter of finding them among everything else. If you lose and we keep not being able to find other options, we might need to settle for picking the lesser evil. And what exactly does that mean for you? In general, it means limiting ourselves. I won't lie, not many of us are attached to the thought of being ruled by gods who can force their whims and desires upon us. It seems like a recipe for stagnation in general. The fact that the gods of this world act through community makes it a lot easier to stomach when one can't unilaterally decide that something is forbidden with no obvious reason. True, I don't really know what things were like on a lot of their old worlds, but I sure wouldn't want to be under a couple of the ones I know about. Your personal issues are one thing, but we've already seen plenty of planets I would describe us as being wholly incompatible with. Even aside from all of the ones I'm comfortable describing as evil gods, we've seen peoples who are forbidden from working metal or preserving food because of whatever strange sensibilities their gods hold, in essence stagnating their entire races. There's an entire universe out there to explore, but the sensibilities of the divine mean so many races will never get off the ground, even if it's all just a step away. That had to be a particularly difficult idea for the Grey as a whole. A technologically advanced race who could have easily gone out to conquer the stars of their homeworld if not for how incompatible their home universe was to the very idea of space travel, locking them all onto a single planet that was slowly dying after losing its sun. To escape that situation may have been the dream, but no matter how better it could have been, they didn't want to be once more trapped under a single world without even the right to leave it. Well, hopefully you won't have to. If things work out here, then we'll get you settled and we can all live happily ever after. Speaking of, how goes trying to rip a hole in your universe? It was one of the many shortcuts they were trying to take to reduce the cost of the summoning spell, and despite everything else, Quillith seemed pleased. We've had success in our trials. The only thing left is trying to keep it open for your gods to come through while making it safe for us to be close by. Viewing the effects of what happens when a body is exposed to the naked chaos is enough to make us want to avoid it at all costs. What? Did you guys have an accident or something? Quillith shook his head. Animal testing. The things that are exposed to it for long enough seem to mutate. We're still trying to understand what happened to some of the bodies we've managed to retrieve, and those who stare into it go insane by all accounts we've seen so far. Bar one, of course. Support the author by searching for the original publication of this novel. Yeah, I'm a lucky guy. So some things have gone through it already? Yes, we've pushed some test subjects through and observed them in the standard way we observe the multiverse. Nobody wants to test their own, unexposed mind against it with a variety of results. Really too many, no two have been affected the same. Most die in one way or another, but some seem to continue to change and thrive, going off to become a part of the vaster interdimensional ecosystem by all accounts. Interesting, and are there no variables that can affect it? No difference in species or genes or diet or age or anything. We've tried to account for all of that, but even the most identical clones we can produce experience the chaos radically differently. Unless it's reflected in undetectable differences in fundamental atoms, we're forced to conclude it may instead be due to either the random nature of the chaos itself with its lack of fixed laws or else an aspect of reality still hidden from us. Their souls. That's true, but, I never gave it much thought before, but when creatures in this reality are cloned, the clones remain soulless and they don't actually do anything unless directed by something else, but I know cloning happened on Earth and now knowing it happens on your world too. I wonder what the difference is. What makes some clones and soulable and others not? A wonderful question for philosophers, but nothing my people can help with. There's already enough bothersome questions about the existence of souls as far as we're concerned. The most important being where they come from and where they go. It doesn't make sense that every life-bearing universe produces some that are compatible with every other life-bearing universe so long as they can get an appropriate vessel, but it also doesn't make sense to think that their existence is some sort of rule for the broader multiverse either, with what happens to them being a whole other question. Your soul mages and gods say they fade away when a life dies, but is there some greater heaven or cycle of reincarnation, or do they simply stop existing? At the very least, they seem to reflect the nature of their paternal species given the innate skills some are born with on your side, with the beast form holders being a perfect example, but honestly, the entire field is a headache that has far too many of our philosophers excited to get over there. Those are all very interesting questions I'm going to do my absolute best not to think about. I have enough stuff on my mind. When it comes to where they come from, I already have an answer, and it's me. Thinking about any of the theological implications beyond that sounds like it would carry a risk of making me stop. So I've heard. You've been busy since you left. How many would you say you've created by this point? I've stopped keeping track. I might be getting close to 1 billion by now. I'm sure if I keep going I'll get a title for it eventually. Or if I'm really curious, I could probably get Verbum to check for me. MMH, I'll admit that a few of my kind have begun to worry that there's some greater power out there who rules over the creation and distribution of souls. I do wonder what such a being would think of you. Hopefully it wouldn't, and it sounds like some of your people are reinventing religion. Can you blame them? Our world is going through its slow death. We've learned that despite all of our study, there's a potentially immortal part of us we've only just become aware of, and we're trying to make a new home in a universe filled with beings that identify themselves as gods. If that isn't going to bring some thoughts of faith, then I don't know what will. Well, if we do succeed in getting you guys over, do me a favor and spread the word to Pray to Myriad. I can verify he's a good guy, you'll all like him. Plus, Getting him new believers keeps me in his good books, so gotta strike while you're all still free. MMH, the question of who any of us might give our faith to among your pantheon is actually a common one these days, and I'll at least say that you make your God look like a good choice. Although the common sentiment is that since you'd gotten so many third tiers from just 200 being pulled over, then even on our low end we should be getting at least a handful, and so we should be prepared to have divinities among our own kin. A couple, sure, but I honestly think this world has gotten unreasonably lucky with their pulls. There's none among the gray and none among the humans. Who knows? Maybe we just don't have the talent. Ha! A depressing thought, but hopefully we'll get the chance to see. I'll at least say that no matter how things turn out, I'm willing to keep my options open. Oh my freaking God, why? I still can't figure out how to materialize with an enchantment. After his talk with Quillith the day before, Ben had wanted to complete that one small goal before moving his focus back to the summoning spell for a while, but he still couldn't get it to work. Not only that, it didn't feel like he was even on the right track for success. By all accounts, making a tool that could materialize was impossible. Except it's not impossible because I've seen it done before, so I know it can be. I'm just missing some big valuable piece of information that I'm by all accounts never gonna get, and it's killing me. Ugh. Myriad. Are you sure you don't have any idea how to do this? MMH, no. I'm pretty certain I'm right, which makes this worse. Are there really no clues up there? MMH, you're right. But he didn't know what else to work on. His minds were still going over designs for Onyx and the summoning spell, and neither were at a place that could keep his hands busy, which mainly just left trying to figure out ways of awakening his two skills, but given he still needed to level connect more before he'd have a chance, he was basically doing all he could, and when it came to sacrilege, he was doing his best by constantly thinking sacrilegious thoughts about the gods of the world in the minor hope it was slowly shaving away at his massive hurdle, while he prayed for a chance to put it to use in a big enough way again. What are the odds one of the gods of this world is secretly evil? I could use the easy bit of experience. If I don't get this in the next 6 or 7 months, I'm going to have to. Don't worry. Nobody is going to miss Aneth and Olencia. But then how will I be able to test the effects of it as a third-tier skill? He asked innocently while Myriad sighed. Unauthorized content usage. If you discover this narrative on Amazon, report the violation. Got it. Reading you loud and clear, buddy. If it comes to that, I'll make sure I think up some proper justification first. I guess he accepted it. Ben shrugged. Whatever it says about me, it's just not something I feel like's a big deal. Relax. It's not like I'm going to go out and murder someone for my own benefit.
Not so fast.
Doing that is for everyone's benefit. Could you imagine a greater joy for a warrior god or whatever Olencia is? To sacrifice themselves for the sake of the planet? It would be beautiful, the sort of thing that everyone would remember them forever for. Honestly, I'd be doing them a favor. Excuse you, I'm literally expecting to die if I succeed. It would actually be in my best interest to fail. God, do you have any ideas? I can just keep making things to try and raise my crafting and enchanting, but those aren't exactly priorities right now. In fact, they're kind of the opposite of priorities. When I'm trying to awaken connect with the entire hope, it will pull in my enchanting. If I awaken my crafting and it pulls it in instead, I'll actually cry, and that's not considering the fact that if enchanting is what awakens, I have no clue which skill it would be more inclined to pull in. Optimistically, it would be both, but that feels like a bit too much to hope for. Reading, that meant going to the Magic Tower's library, an idea he wasn't entirely against. He may have completed the main building, but they were sure to get new books in semi-regularly, and there were still all of the surrounding buildings to read through too. Just because the information in those ones was looked at as being less valuable didn't mean he had no chance of striking a nugget of gold. Hell, the book on sacrificial enchantments he'd found so long ago hadn't been viewed as exceptionally important either, and he'd been able to use it to drastically improve the way Thera could cast her magic at the time. With the only drawback being his little promise to himself. He was still trying to avoid being too reliant on his coat. A goal that he hated to his core but was exceptionally important when one considered that it was for the express purpose of keeping his soul from being destroyed in the future, but any time away from it was time he wouldn't be making souls to the positively insane level he currently was, meaning his progress on that front would slow too. But then maybe a break there would be good too. He couldn't deny that the fact he'd seen that his strategy had worked was motivating him to push all the harder. Pulling mana into himself was never pleasant, but since he'd gotten back he was doing it at a volume that was downright painful. Even if not to the extent he'd done it when escaping the demon world, it still wasn't necessarily safe either. It does help raise my soul expansion, but I'd rather not be the first person to discover that this sort of thing can destroy a soul either. Okay, Myriad is right. A break from this is in order and I might as well fill it with some reading. Looks like I'm off to the library. Going through his workshop in Analia to grab all of his clones first, Ben walked them all through the city to the gate, ignoring any looks he got along the way as the group of them made their way to the library, keeping an eye on one unpleasant fact. Partway through walking the streets of the Magic Towers, he'd begun being followed. It was only about 3 of them, but he was only able to tell while looking through the eyes of others, the ones on his tail too far away to be within range of deep connection to see what they wanted. But is that because they know I'm a mind reader, or are they just trying to avoid being noticed? Okay, play it cool and I'll see what they do when I get there. So far they hadn't made any moves, but considering that it had only been a few days prior that he'd last been attacked, he couldn't help but be on edge, only holding back from confronting them then and there out of pure curiosity. After all, they couldn't have been waiting for him. The times he'd go to the library were too few and far between, and not even he'd known that he'd be making his way there when the day started. Nor could he have looked like an easy target. With 14 homunculi to his name, he didn't look like a single person but instead a group that just happened to wear the same face, not someone others would so casually aim to mug. He just kept waiting for whatever was going to happen, but by the time he'd made his way to the library and passed through its main doors, they'd stopped, either losing their nerve once he'd gone in or else standing outside to wait for him to finish, which would admittedly be quick. Unlike so many others who'd spend hours reading there, Ben only needed to look around to find whatever new books it held, only stopping for a moment to admire his own contributions to the place. Off to the side was the display donated by the Church of Myriad, holding both his circlets for general use as well as copies of his magic books, with plenty around the building using the first while others were pulled into the latter's effects while they read, showing that his contributions were being well used. He could even see his mana bracelets around the arms of a few readers despite how recently they'd begun being distributed, with the tool being successfully spread out into the world for all to benefit from, and couldn't help but feel just a bit of pride. No matter how little it felt like many of the gods of the world were willing to value his work, he'd been making a difference in both the knowledge and power of the people, and that meant more would get to live for his efforts. Wonder how much faith Myriad's been pulling in from all of my work anyway? I'll have to ask him sometime. For the moment, though, he instead focused on his learning. The staff and many of the other patrons long used to seeing him by that point, even if he was barely reading in comparison to how he'd usually do it. As he went around, he found less than a dozen books in the main building that he hadn't touched before, leaving him to only go to see what the surrounding buildings held. But not before passing a window, looking outside to see that the 3 he'd left had grown to over 20 as a crowd stood in wait, only making him wonder just what they were there for more, along with how to deal with them. They hadn't done anything to him yet, so he couldn't exactly go out guns blazing, but he was prepared for the worst. A part of him briefly considered asking one of the library's guards to walk out with him, just so he'd have a witness if things went poorly, before thinking better of it. If they wanted to cause problems, then he'd simply rip their mana from them and leave them in a state of mana exhaustion to make them both harmless and someone else's problem, and he walked out to finally get his answers, feeling as they turned to him one by one once he came out. Their conversation stopped with his presence. Ben stopped too, silently looking back at them and waiting for one to either say something or for them to scatter as he reached out with Connect to read their minds, dropping his guard as he both got his answer and one of them finally spoke. "Excuse me," the closest said. "Sorry to bother you, but we were hoping to get a bit of your time." "Sure, I don't mind." Ben gave in easily enough, no longer concerned and letting them talk as if he hadn't just fiddled through their thoughts. "What can I do for you all?" "Ah, so to be clear, you're the Apostle of Myriad? The one who wrote those books and has read through the entirety of the library. Just the main building, but yeah. Other than that, you've got it. Taken from Royal Road. This narrative should be reported if found on Amazon." "Ah, wonderful. I'm sorry if this is a bit much, but we were wondering if it would be possible to get some of your time then. We were hoping we might get the chance to pick your brain over some of our areas of research." It seemed, without paying too much attention to it, Ben had developed a reputation among the magic towers as something of a genius. Plenty had seen the way he'd read and plenty had tested him to see if he was really processing that information or just trying to look impressive, consistently finding it was the first. With that fact tied into all, he donated to help the scholars and mages of the library as a whole, and it looked like more than a few had been waiting for the chance to pick his brain, with a couple finally having seen him and spread the word the best they could, ending up with the present crowd for him to respond to. It wasn't like he was against the idea either. He had no issue talking with others and helping them the best he could. But with all of them there, he couldn't help but see an opportunity that he didn't want to pass up on. I don't mind giving any of you some ideas or help with anything you're working on if I can just ask for an hour or two of your time in exchange, he began, putting on his best salesman smile. As you can see, I have a skill that lets me use homunculi to read more. I'm sure that's fairly common knowledge by this point, but it's grown to be a bit more powerful recently. If you'd all let me borrow your bodies for a bit, I'd be able to use them to get more reading done, and while doing that I'd be happy to talk with any of you about your areas of study. It wasn't the most complete description of his skills, and it wasn't like it would be the best way of doing it either, but if he had Thera make him more homunculi, that meant he'd have even more bodies he'd need to take care of. As it was, he already had to feed the bunch he'd brought with him, and even if he had near endless money, it still took time. Instead, using the bodies of people who could then go off to feed themselves would be significantly more convenient. It was a request that brought forth a few uncomfortable looks, with what he was describing sounding far too close to mind control for an average person to want to be exposed to, but after the first gave in the others soon followed, all of them looking for the opportunity to exchange ideas with what they otherwise viewed as someone who had to be a brilliant mind. Very well, the first said with a nod. I agree. Perfect, in that case, everyone who's willing, follow me. Despite some hesitation, none left. Every single one who'd waited for him followed him to one of the other buildings, going inside as he gathered them around himself. All right, I'm going to start, so don't freak out. With that bit of warning, he reached out, merging himself into the deepest recesses of their minds. Each body was different, but with his growing skill with using hive mind combined with his alien thought structure, he nearly instantly understood how to use them, moving the crowd with him while pulling the conscious regions of their thoughts into his own head, constructing mental environments where they could talk without needing to worry about them trying to take back control, instead listening to them all explain the details of their study or research or even simply areas they struggled with, helping them all as he used their eyes to read. The mana cost was raised with just how many books he'd be able to go through as he pulled out entire shelves to let him read them all with scores of eyes, feeling him learn and integrate the information as he sifted through it, looking for any useful spells or ideas he could incorporate into his own work but finding results to be few. There were minor improvements to be made with some of the research he was seeing, but largely he viewed their placement outside of the main building as correct. They weren't quite good enough to deserve the spotlight. Although a few of these are actually better than some of their equivalents in the main building, either written better or more complete in their information. What the heck? While I'm doing this, it's not like it would hurt to make a list of suggested changes for Killy. She can either take them or not, it's up to her. More interesting than that ended up being what was going on in his minds as he went, talking with the others for what help he could give but finding himself enjoying the back and forth. None of their problems seemed particularly challenging if he ignored that for the most part. He didn't actually have the ability to test out the suggestions he offered himself, but it was a chance to explore different topics he usually didn't care about. It was a welcome change of pace from what he'd usually do. A change of pace that helped with his progress as well. By the time they were done, he'd read through the better part of that building, with the amount left being something he could finish on his own in just a couple more hours of work by the time he let them go. Okay. Hope that was useful for you. I at least appreciate your help with my reading, so I hope it was worth your time. The enthusiastic response told him that they at least viewed it as being so, with one among them speaking up. Will you be here again anytime soon by any chance? I have a few acquaintances I'm sure would value the opportunity to talk to you as well. MMH. Sure. It wouldn't hurt me to try and go through a bit more, so I'll come again tomorrow. If anyone wants to send anyone else my way, then I'd welcome the chance. It meant that he wouldn't be sleeping that night to catch up on the Soul production he'd be missing out on, but considering how little he was sleeping in general to work, it wouldn't be the biggest deal. With those around him seeming more than pleased, as a few even ran off then and there to spread the word to others. The rest stayed long enough to give their thanks before heading out as well, all of them wanting to test out some of the ideas between them while there was still some day left. Okay, looks like I've got my plans for tomorrow sorted too, but for now, I'll finish up my reading and then get back to work. It's nice to have something to keep me busy anyway. A myriad? What the hell is all of this? That's one word for it, I guess. There had to be 1,000 people waiting outside the library when he arrived that day, all of them either locking onto him out of recognition or else seeing him for the first time but picking up on the reaction of others, with the only thing that kept him from being swarmed being some of the guards and librarians having come outside to bring order to things, with the highest ranked among them coming over to greet him. While I don't personally mind, in the future I'd appreciate some notice if you're planning to host an event here, Killy told him as she surveyed the rest. Although I suppose any enthusiasm they have to learn is exactly what the building is for. Sorry Killy. I really wasn't expecting this when I said I'd be willing to give some people some help. I thought there'd be maybe 20 again. Not this. You've underestimated by quite the amount, but thankfully we got some heads up. The head of the Mages Guild reached out to me after word started going around. It seems the people you spoke to almost all had major breakthroughs in their spell development, with a couple even getting levels. I can't take credit for that second bit. Why not? Knowledge of magic has a direct tie to use of magic. If you helped with a person's understanding and it led them to doing more, why wouldn't that qualify as you contributing? Okay, point taken. So that's why so many showed up. Largely, I'm sure, although I wouldn't underestimate the rumors going on about you. The way you read has drawn enough eyes and people talk, especially here. I've even heard a few say that seeing you is supposed to be good luck. I'm sorry. Killy just laughed. Superstition sprouts from everything. You're here infrequently enough but make a big impact each time. Some say that if they read when you're around they'll be more successful in their learning too. That might actually be true, oops. There were more than a few times when he'd read that he'd subtly thread his thoughts into anyone who was in his range to let them get the effects of his knowledge skill. Even if it had just been something to do for his own practice, it was always going to have a positive effect on those around him. Of course, that was back when the skill was only mental symbiosis and now the library had all of his circlets too. But there was no denying he would have had a small impact on those around him from the small unauthorized use of his skills. Not going to mention that though. Okay, well, they can believe what they want. In that case, sorry Killy, but could I get your help dividing groups between the buildings? I should be able to go through them all. What, you're going to read the rest of the library today? With this many people, yeah, looks like it, he shrugged. I didn't go crazy yesterday, but I can fit an absolute ton of people into my total range now and my mana's nothing to scoff at either. It will still probably take all day, but I should be able to get everything here read. Minus the basement. God, I want to access it so freaking bad. Is that really so wrong? Very well. I'll spread the word. Killy agreed before she stepped away to direct people, letting Ben choose the first group he'd take. It was going to be an exercise of many of his skills, but most importantly, for deep connection, so he was going to do his best to get everything he could from it as the day went on. I was expecting to get something out of this. Ben thought as the day ended, with the last building read through and the last group giving their thanks and running off to test some of the ideas he'd helped develop with them. I mean, that's pretty good, but to be honest, I was kind of thinking I might get a title. Master of the Library has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? As the only guy who has to have read every book it holds, I thought I might get something like that. Plus, and I know this isn't the goal, but let's be real here, I deserve it. I thought this might awaken my knowledge skill. If I wasn't before, I'm officially one of the best read people on the entire planet. MMH, maybe in the future. It's not exactly a priority. If I awaken my other two skills, I might attempt it for the extra attribute bonuses though. Unauthorized usage. This tale is on Amazon without the author's consent. Report any sightings. So get me basement access. But I could have even more. I don't know, mostly the dopamine hit at this point. It felt like Myriad was going to comment, only stopping as Killy walked over, with a large herring-like person walking beside her. Well, you really did it, she told him, sounding impressed. How would you describe the experience? Was it worthwhile reading all of that? Maybe, he admitted, not giving an incredible review but still having grown from it all. After reading all of that and talking with those mages, I think there's a few edits I'd probably make to the books I submitted, and there's a few interesting ideas I could try applying to my work, but nothing life-changing in there, at least as I currently see it. I'd say that by and large, the main building does what it's supposed to by holding all of the most relevant and important bits of knowledge with only a few exceptions. He materialized a list of nearly 500 books from there and handed it over, watching as her eyes flickered over it. Those are the ones I think should be moved, either into the main building or out of it, based on the information I've seen as well as my own observations working with different types of magic. Obviously, it's up to you in the end, but I figured it wouldn't hurt to share. I'll give this a look, thank you. And Speeny, what do you think? I can't argue with the reviews after seeing him in person, the bird person said, giving Ben an appraising look. I even heard someone say they gained a level to their magic just by talking to him. That was literally just one person. They had to be so close to getting it that a single decent spell would have pushed them over the edge. Likely, but to give the sort of understanding that could take a single spell's place is nothing to scoff at. So, should I take you to be the same apostle who's been awakening people en masse? You can. Who are you and why do you know about me? Word was obviously going to spread, but his identity as the person who'd helped with 2 of the world's mass awakening events hadn't been so largely revealed, although he hadn't been shy about keeping it to himself at the time either. He'd been with friends both times who'd certainly said his name on occasion while they talked, and if anyone had been too pushy in their thanks, he'd just told them to give it to Myriad. Plus a few of the dryads he'd helped had known who he was as well, and then there were summoned among them too, which meant their nations probably knew who he was in the case of the humans. The more I think about it, the more it wouldn't be the most surprising if almost every awakened mage on the planet could recognize me. Oh well, whatever. Even if he didn't go out of his way to advertise himself, the chances of being unknown had vanished after his first very public awakening at Craftsman's Tower. With nations, gods, and the Grey all keeping some level of watch on him, the idea that a random person would know who he was far from shocking, to the point that the person in question seemed amused as well. I'd be rather poor at my job if I hadn't heard of you, Speeny laughed while Killy answered. Ben, this is the head of the Mages Guild. He's the one who told me this was happening today after he got word, and he wanted the chance to meet you himself. Oh, cool. Nice to meet you then. Like she said, I'm Ben. Anything I can do for you? Charmed and straight to the point, lovely. Like I've already said, I am familiar with you and your work. You've been making quite the name for yourself between the things I've been able to verify and those that are just rumors. Are you really the one who's the star of that musical number going around? Unfortunately, but let's not focus on that, please. Of course. Anyway, Killy here is happy to sing your praise, and after seeing how fast you worked today, and hearing how happy everyone who got some of your time was, I was wondering if I might convince you to take me up on an offer for work. Depending on what you have in mind, I could be convinced, but I need to tell you, I'm not much of a mage. I just watched you materialize something. Okay, I'm a pretty good mage, but that really isn't my priority, and I can only use enchanting and a couple of obscure non-affinity branches. I may not be able to help. What matters is that you're knowledgeable, that's more than enough. I was hoping that I'd be able to get you to come into the guild to do exactly what you did here today, talk and guide people in their magics, giving what advice you could. Considering this as a dry run would already mean tremendous success. As far as I'm concerned, the worth of such a thing has already been proven. Would that even be a good use of my time? If it was just going to be one day, it wouldn't be the biggest loss. Ben had already devoted the last 2 days to that exact thing, but he still felt himself hesitate. Both that day and the one prior had been whims, but he couldn't constantly be beholden to such things when he had such high goals to work towards. But at the same time, this is training for Connect, and it doesn't hurt me either. Okay, sure, he gave in. I wouldn't be able to for a couple weeks, but in that time I wouldn't mind taking the opportunity to help teach others. He wanted to finish his current job first and get every other one sorted after, but once that was done he'd have nothing but time. Why not take a day to teach for whatever benefits it would bring? It certainly wasn't like it would hurt to be in the good books of one of the major guild heads, all things considered. Excellent. I appreciate your agreement. Now, as for payment, usually I'd offer you a good sum, but given I know you're an awakened craftsman, I'm sure wealth isn't an issue. Would you rather that, or is there anything else I might offer? You're right, I don't really need the cash. Tell you what, if you make it clear that the lessons are coming from the Apostle of Myriad and advise attendees to offer a prayer of thanks, then we'll call it square. How's that sound? Ah, a pious one, I can respect that. If that's all you're asking for your services, then so be it. In that case, I'll look forward to having you. Setting a firm date, Speeny parted from there, leaving Ben to chat only a bit more with Killy before heading home. What do you think of that? A good, friendly apostle here and getting you more and more faith. Aren't I the best? Like what? I can get anything I want, otherwise might as well get you some faith. Unless you're going to tell me he could have gotten me basement access. In that case, all's well that ends well. If you're feeling really grateful, you could give me a single job level. Lame. In that case, back to the grind. Can I get a hand over here? Coming! Thera yelled back, rushing through the floor past other patients to reach one of the many healers' sides, finding them focusing on someone who'd just been brought in, their large intestine hanging out of a gouge in their torso, while they did their best to keep them alive. Despite everyone around wearing one of Ben's mana bracelets, there was still a matter of skill needed to finish a task quickly. Not something they always had in urgent cases such as that, which is where she came in, moving the organ back into place with her magic while forcing the body to cannibalize itself to make up for the lost mass as tissue knit back together, looking no worse for wear other than the drop in overall weight that would leave them a bit weaker until they got enough food in them to replace it as she gave the patient some quick orders. Low activity for the next week if you can help it, and focus on eating your regular meals. I did the best I can, but you'll be low on blood for a while, so you might get lightheaded, but you're done. Her bedside manner could have used some work, but they were busy enough that she didn't have time to care. Even if things had slowed down, thanks both to the bracelets and the end of the wave, there were still people constantly fighting across the planet, with some major battles still taking place every single day. The fighting was never going to stop, which meant neither was the work. But they had dedicated healers and the demons didn't. The longer they held out, the easier it would supposedly get. At least that was what she was telling herself, but when she was there it didn't feel like it. Even walking around deserted or overstuffed cities gave a better impression than being in a single hospital. The surrounding feeling of pain and death was oppressing each time she walked into it, even if she knew that she was making a difference. Each time she went to one, she alone was enough to make their load manageable, in some cases even more than that, with the one she was in serving as a good example. While the hours went on, she healed more than could be brought in, leaving the place in a bearable condition for the rest of the light and life mages with her, giving them all just a bit of rest by the time she was finally done. Good work today, the hospital's director told her, the same woman she'd been working with since the beginning of the second wave, who she embarrassingly still hadn't learned the name of. How are you feeling? Tired? But who isn't? I still have some more personal work to do too, so I'm gonna have to head out soon. Oh, of course. Don't worry. Every one of us here appreciates having whatever help you can give. Will we be seeing you again tomorrow? MHM. As long as there's not an emergency, I'll always give you some warning if I'm going to be away, so I'll do what I can. Wonderful. Then we'll look forward to having you. They parted from there, Thera back off into the world to what bits of peace it contained. Since that hospital wasn't close to an invasion point, the city was a lot more packed than others she would go to, acting as one of many places others went to escape the peril of their homes, which crowded the streets, even if it still showed signs of danger. Just walking to the nearby gate, there were already more injured being ferried through for whatever treatments they could get, but that was never going to stop, and it couldn't be her sole focus in life. With the way things were looking, no matter how bad it could get, their world wasn't going to fall before the third wave, meaning she couldn't skimp on her combat either, even with the thought filling her with complicated emotions. The third wave. She was sure it was something on plenty of minds, but it had only become more so on hers for the recent talk she'd had. Ben wanted to get to a point where he could personally influence the results of the war, something that felt like madness and almost certainly stemmed from all of the negative experiences he'd had since coming to the world, which was one thing. He had an overall terrible evaluation about the safety of the planet, and even if she strongly disagreed with the conclusion, she couldn't deny how he'd come to it. No matter what was thrown at him, he had overcome it each time. If he wanted to somehow solve the invasion, then she wasn't going to stop him, especially considering that if a god really did need to be dealt with, he most certainly had a perfect skill to handle it. The real problem was beyond that. He still thought he was going to fail, probably doomed to die in the process. What was she supposed to say or do about that? If he was so certain that the world didn't stand a chance, then even if she wanted to, she wasn't going to doubt him, but then the reaction should have been something else. He should be running away, not looking at any way to inch up his odds, no matter how still in the negatives they would be. Just thinking about it was leaving her stressed, with her only saving grace being what he needed to get to that point. As good as he was, he said he needed to awaken 2 separate skills in the months they had left. You could be reading stolen content. Head to the original site for the genuine story. She believed in Ben. She was willing to place the entirety of her trust and faith in him if it came down to it. But achieving that was another thing entirely. She could comfortably tell herself that he wouldn't get to that point, so he wouldn't be tempted to throw his life away, and she could believe it. It didn't matter how good he was at raising skills, what he was aiming for was different. Even if she thought he might manage it one day, that time frame was something else entirely. So that meant on that front there was nothing to worry about, with only an entirely different problem left. She understood why he believed that things wouldn't end if they just survived past the 3rd wave. Even if she wanted to hope it was a reality she could still prepare for, meaning she just had to get better herself to deal with it, gaining what strength she could in the time they had left. If things didn't end there, then that just meant they'd need to hang on through a 4th wave and a 5th, and however many it might take for the demons and their god to get to the point that their world wasn't going to be conquered. And with that frame of mind she went out to the untamed lands. "Princess, over there," one of the spirits swarming her directed as she flew above the trees, looking for targets to practice her magic on and coming across the very sort of herd she wanted, with demons within her reach. She instantly changed her direction, going out to them while she silently spoke back. "How many?" 20. Perfect. It was a small enough size that she'd be able to manage, but not so small that she wouldn't be able to test her spells, and she brought herself to the ground hard. The sound of the crash being enough to draw the monsters in while she was still a bit away as she prepared her spells for all they were worth, filling the ground with earth and life mana and watching as the dirt around her sprung up under her power, taking the shape she desired and moving out in preparation of what was to come. An artist she was not, but as far as golems went, the proportions weren't terrible and they moved like she wanted, towering above her and looking powerful by the time the first demon came into view, looking like it thought better of its target by the time the rest showed up as some tried to escape, losing that option as she raised up a wall behind them to keep them in place. No running away. Now given no chance to escape, they had no other option but to fight, and with the choice made on their behalf they wasted no time, some lunging forward while others tried to cast their own spells, easily blocked with her power while the golems began their slaughter, smashing through flesh and breaking bones, and the beasts around her scampered to survive, some being lucky enough to avoid her blows while she regarded them largely with disinterest. She was seeing that the golems were less efficient than her usual way of doing things, but it was still a chance to experiment, one she wouldn't reject as her tests continued, pulling over a wad of demon flesh to reshape it under her power, filling it with her mana and watching as it consumed the earth around them, remaking itself into a clone of what one of her spells had just destroyed. She still didn't have the experience she needed to comfortably alter a homunculus to suit her purposes, but that was something she could work on more in the future. For the time being, her goal was to practice something else she'd usually fail at: controlling them. It should have been a similar process as creating the false life of a golem, and by and large it felt like it, but it created a different sort of strain on her magic, leaving more areas to manage, even as she successfully got it to move under her power. "Okay, I can do this with a bit more practice, but now that I have this to work with, I can try more for the rest of the day until I get the hang of it. That just leaves one more thing to try." Controlling golems and homunculi were in essence applications of the same sort of spell, but there was one more related one that should have been just barely under her domain of power. As life magic grew, it became closer to death, letting spells cross over until they eventually reached beyond to the realm of souls, but with where she stood she wanted to try it for whatever growth it would give her, and firing off a small stone bullet at one of the remaining surviving demons, she once more filled it with her power. If the other 2 spells came down to filling something with a false life, then there was no reason she couldn't apply it to something else, something that had been alive only moments prior, and as her mana flooded the still warm corpse she watched it twitch before jerkily getting up, the core of itself gone and replaced with her will. But it was the worst by far. Shaky on its feet and taking so much more mana than anything else, She doubted she'd be able to use it in a fight, even if it was working, killing the idea that she could turn any corpses she made to her side in a future wave. Her mana would be much better placed elsewhere. But if I just want my own army to fight with, then I should be able to use my dark magic pretty effectively if I just raise it more. She thought aloud, paying no mind to the only surviving demon by that point. There's no reason I couldn't control what comes through a gate to focus on killing each other. Okay, that's something worth looking into. I'll need to practice it. Using mind magics may have been illegal on people, but even if the system recognized demons as such, the people of the world didn't, meaning there'd be no harm. All she'd need was to get the experience with it, eyeing the only one that had managed to hang on to life despite its growing injuries. It would be better to find another crowd. Not much point here, so I guess I should finish up. Wait! Cried out. Mercy! It was enough to make Thera pause, tilting her head to the side as she appraised it before crushing it in the earth beneath its feet. She knew intelligent ones had made it through to the world, and the idea that one might think to beg, either genuinely or as some trap she couldn't say, wasn't out of the question. To its misfortune, though, it seemed that despite the system effect she was under, the uncountable demons she'd slaughtered in the second wave had left her numb even to their pleas and paid it no mind, even as she raised herself in the air to talk to the spirits once more. Okay, I don't need to be home for a while yet, so let's see if we can find some more.